The warehouse was already collapsing when Caleb Turner saw her, a firefighter pinned beneath burning timber, her crew nowhere in sight. In 30 seconds, the roof would cave. In 60, she'd be dead. But sometimes heroes aren't the ones wearing badges. They're broke single dads who haven't slept in 3 days, running barefoot into flames because their 8-year-old son screamed, "Dad, someone's still in there." If you're watching from Nashville, Memphis, or anywhere else courage still matters, stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything. The December wind cut through Caleb Turner's threadbare jacket like a knife through paper as he stood in the parking lot of Meadowbrook Elementary, watching other parents pick up their kids in heated SUVs and minivans. His own vehicle, a 1998 Ford pickup with more rust than paint, sat wheezing in the corner, one headlight flickering like it was sending Morse code to the universe about his failures. "Dad!" Ethan's voice broke through his thoughts, and suddenly 8 years of exhaustion melted away as his son bounded toward him, backpack bouncing, that gap-toothed grin lighting up the gray Tennessee afternoon. "Hey, buddy!" Caleb scooped him up, ignoring the protest from his back. 12 hours at the construction site had taken their toll again. "Good day?" "Mrs. Henderson says I'm the best reader in class," Ethan announced proudly, then his voice dropped to a whisper. "But Tommy Marshall said we're poor because you don't have a real job." The words hit Caleb harder than any physical blow could. He set Ethan down gently, crouched to his level. "Listen to me, son. There's no shame in honest work. Your dad builds things with his hands. Houses where families make memories. Schools where kids learn. That's as real as it gets." "I know, Dad. I told Tommy you're the strongest man in Tennessee." "You could probably lift his dad's fancy car if you wanted to." Caleb ruffled his son's sandy hair, the same shade as his late wife Sarah's. 3 years since the cancer took her, and Ethan still had her smile, her optimism, her way of seeing the best in everything, especially in him. "Come on, let's get home. Got a surprise for dinner." "Mac and cheese again?" Ethan asked, but there was no complaint in his voice, just curiosity. "The fancy kind," with the cartoon character on the box. They drove through Millbrook, Tennessee, population 8,000 on a good day, past the closed textile mill that used to employ half the town, past foreclosure signs that sprouted like weeds after a hard rain. The radio crackled with news about another factory shutting down, another round of layoffs, but Caleb switched it to the classic rock station. Some battles you fought, others you just survived. Their rental house sat at the end of Oakwood Drive, a small 2-bedroom that had seen better decades. The landlord had promised to fix the leaking roof 2 months ago, but promises were cheap in Millbrook. Caleb had patched it himself with materials borrowed from job sites, technically theft, but he'd long ago stopped caring about technicalities when it came to keeping his son warm and dry. "Homework first," Caleb said as they walked through the door, though he knew Ethan would have done it anyway. The kid was disciplined in ways that amazed him, considering the chaos of their life. While Ethan spread his books on the kitchen table, the one Sarah had picked out at a yard sale, painted sunshine yellow because she said it would brighten their mornings, Caleb started dinner. The gas stove took 3 tries to light, and the oven door had to be propped closed with a broom handle, but it worked. Everything in their life was held together with duct tape and determination. "Dad, what's a hero?" Ethan asked suddenly, pencil paused over his worksheet. "Where's this coming from?" "We're writing essays about heroes. Most kids are writing about Superman or Captain America, but those aren't real people." Caleb stirred the mac and cheese, considering. A hero is someone who does the right thing, even when it's hard, even when they're scared. "Were you scared in Iraq?" The question caught him off guard. Ethan rarely asked about his military service. "Every day." "But you still went." "That's different, buddy. I was trained for that. Real heroes." He paused, thinking of Sarah in those final months, how she'd smiled through the pain, insisted on walking Ethan to school until she physically couldn't anymore. Real heroes are people like your mom, fighting battles nobody else can see, staying strong for the people they love. "I'm writing about you," Ethan said matter-of-factly, returning to his homework. "Ethan, you work all day and never complain. You help Mrs. Chen with her groceries even though your back hurts. You fixed Jenny Patterson's bike when her dad said they couldn't afford a new one. That's hero stuff, Dad. Caleb turned back to the stove, blinking hard. How did you tell an 8-year-old that heroes didn't let their wives die, didn't struggle to pay rent, didn't lie awake at night wondering how they'd afford winter coats? After dinner, the mac and cheese supplemented with the last apple, cut into slices to make it seem like more. They settled into their evening routine. Ethan read aloud from his library book while Caleb patched his work jeans for the 3rd time this month. The domestic quiet was interrupted by sirens in the distance, unusual for their sleepy neighborhood. Fire truck, Ethan identified, ear-trained from years of Caleb teaching him emergency sounds. Sounds like more than one. The sirens grew louder, closer. Through their window, they could see an orange glow painting the sky 3 blocks over. The old Brennan warehouse, abandoned for years, supposedly being renovated into low-income housing. Caleb had bid on that job, lost it to a company that could afford to work for pennies on the dollar. Stay here, Caleb told Ethan, grabbing his jacket. But his son was already pulling on his coat. You said heroes help people. Ethan, this is different. I'll stay back, I promise. But what if someone needs help? There was no arguing with Sarah's stubborn streak living on in their son. You stay right beside me, understand? No wandering off. They jogged toward the glow, joining a growing crowd of neighbors. The warehouse was fully engulfed, flames shooting through the roof like angry fingers clawing at the night sky. 3 fire trucks were already on scene, firefighters battling the inferno with streams of water that seemed pitifully small against the rage of the fire. Beautiful and terrible, Mrs. Chen murmured beside them, her weathered face reflecting the orange light. Nobody was supposed to be in there, someone said. It's been empty for years. But Caleb noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of the fire trucks, Engine 19, sat abandoned, its crew nowhere near it. And there, barely visible through the smoke and chaos, was a firefighter's helmet on the ground near the building's east entrance. Ethan, do you see? Dad! His son's voice was sharp with panic. Dad, look! There's someone in there! Caleb followed his son's pointing finger. Through a blown-out window on the first floor, barely visible through the smoke, was movement. Not the random dance of flames, but deliberate, desperate movement. Hey! Caleb grabbed the nearest firefighter. There's someone inside! East wall, first floor. The firefighter, young, probably a rookie, shook his head. Can't be. We did a sweep. Building's empty. Captain Hale went in for a final check, but his face went white. Oh God, Captain Hale. She hasn't reported back. How long? 10 minutes. Maybe more. The radios went dead. Something about the heat. Caleb didn't hear the rest. He was already moving, muscle memory, from Iraq taking over. Assess, adapt, act. The front entrance was impossible, fully engulfed, but the east side, where he'd seen movement, there was a loading dock door, partially collapsed, but maybe... Sir, you can't... Someone shouted, but Caleb was already running. The heat hit him like a physical wall 20 feet from the building. At 10 feet, his exposed skin felt like it was blistering. At the threshold, stepping through the partially collapsed door, it was like walking into hell's waiting room. The smoke was so thick he couldn't see 3 feet ahead. He dropped to his knees, smoke rises, stay low, basic training, and common sense screaming instructions. The concrete floor was hot enough to burn through his jeans. Fire department, he shouted, though the roar of the flames swallowed his voice. Can anyone hear me? A crash to his left, timber falling. The building was coming apart. Minutes, maybe seconds, from total collapse. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but then he heard it, a sound that wasn't fire or falling debris. A human sound. Pain. He crawled toward it, hands burning on the hot floor, lungs screaming for clean air that didn't exist. Through the smoke, he saw her, a firefighter pinned beneath a massive wooden beam that had fallen from the ceiling. Her helmet was gone, blonde hair matted with blood, but her eyes were open, aware. Get out, she gasped when she saw him. Structures compromised. Get out now. Not without you. Caleb assessed quickly. The beam had her pinned at the waist. Heavy, but the angle. If he could lift one end enough for her to slide out. You can't. It's too heavy. I already tried. Then we try again. He positioned himself at the end of the beam, finding leverage. What's your name? Morgan, Captain Morgan Hale. Well, Captain, I'm Caleb, and I've got a son outside who thinks I'm a hero. Can't let him down now, can I? You're crazy. Been called worse on 3. 1, it won't work. 2, the ceiling's about to... 3. Caleb lifted with everything he had, every morning of manual labor, every push-up in basic training, every moment of desperate strength he'd ever possessed channeled into this one action. The beam shifted, barely, inches maybe, but enough. Move, he growled through gritted teeth. Morgan dragged herself backward, using her elbows, her gear scraping against the concrete. The second she was clear, Caleb let the beam drop and grabbed her under the arms, hauling her toward the door. My team, she started, will kill me if I don't get you out now. They burst through the door just as a massive crack split the air. Caleb threw them both forward, covering Morgan with his body as the entire east wall of the warehouse collapsed inward. Debris rained down, something sharp catching his shoulder, but they were out. They were alive. Medic, someone was shouting. We need a medic here. Hands pulled at them, separating them. Caleb found himself on his back, staring at stars he couldn't usually see through Millbrook's light pollution. The fire had blown out power for blocks. Dad! Dad! Ethan's face appeared above him, tears streaming. Are you okay? Please be okay. I'm good, buddy. His voice came out like gravel. Just need a minute. You saved her, Dad. Everyone saw. You ran into the fire and saved her. Paramedics swarmed them both. Morgan was loaded onto a gurney, oxygen mask over her face, but she was fighting them, trying to sit up, trying to see. Their eyes met across the chaos. She pulled the mask down for a second. Thank you, she mouthed. Then she was gone, loaded into an ambulance, sirens wailing as it sped toward Millbrook General. Sir, we need to check you out, a paramedic was saying, but Caleb waved him off. I'm fine. Just some smoke. Your hands are burned. Your shoulder's bleeding. He looked down, surprised. His palms were raw, blistered from the hot floor. His jacket was torn at the shoulder, blood seeping through. Right. Okay. They cleaned and bandaged him there, refusing his repeated insistence that he didn't need a hospital. Ethan never left his side, small hand gripping Caleb's jacket like he might disappear if he let go. You were amazing, Dad, Ethan whispered, just like the heroes in my books. Better, because you're real. Chief Patterson, Millbrook's fire chief for the past 20 years, approached them as the paramedics finished. His face was grim. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in my career, Turner. Probably both. Captain Hale's one of my best. 10-year veteran, more commendations than anyone in the department. She was doing a final sweep, making sure we hadn't missed anyone. Homeless folks sometimes sleep in these abandoned buildings. Radio died, ceiling came down. He paused. You saved her life. No question about it. Anyone would have. No, Patterson cut him off. They wouldn't have. They didn't. You did. The crowd was dispersing now, the fire under control, though the warehouse was a total loss. Several people patted Caleb's back, murmured thanks or praise. Mrs. Chen pressed a Tupperware container into his hands. Soup, she said, for tomorrow. Jenny Patterson's father shook his hand silently, eyes saying what words couldn't. As they walked home, Ethan chattering excitedly about everything he'd seen, Caleb's mind kept returning to that moment, Morgan's eyes meeting his through the smoke, that instant of connection between two people balanced on the knife's edge, between life and death. At home, Caleb tucked Ethan into bed, sitting on the edge of the narrow mattress they'd bought at Goodwill. Dad, why did you do it? Really? Caleb considered lying, giving some simple answer about duty or instinct, but his son deserved truth. Because I saw someone who needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That's all heroism really is, buddy. Being in the right place and choosing to act instead of looking away. Mom would be proud. The words hit him unexpectedly, tears he'd been holding back for 3 years suddenly threatening to spill. Yeah, she would be. Can we visit the firefighter lady? Make sure she's okay? We'll see. Get some sleep now. But sleep didn't come easily for Caleb. His hands throbbed despite the painkillers the paramedics had given him. His shoulder ached. But mostly, He couldn't stop thinking about Morgan Hale, the way she'd tried to send him away, protect him even while pinned and facing death, the strength in her eyes despite the pain, the way she'd fought the paramedics to thank him. He stood at his window, looking out at the spot where orange light had painted the sky hours earlier. Nothing there now but darkness and the occasional flicker of emergency lights as crews monitored the ruins. His phone, an ancient flip phone that Ethan mocked lovingly, buzzed with a text from his foreman. Saw the news. Take tomorrow off. Paid. Heroes need rest. News? Caleb flipped on their small TV, keeping the volume low. The local station was running the story on repeat. Someone had filmed him running into the building, the footage grainy but dramatic. Local hero saves fire captain scrolled across the bottom of the screen. He turned it off. Heroes didn't struggle to make rent. Heroes didn't fail their wives. Didn't spend nights wondering how they'd afford groceries and gas in the same week. Heroes were people like Morgan Hale, who ran into danger for a living, who led teams and saved lives as a matter of routine. But as he climbed into bed, exhausted beyond measure, Caleb allowed himself one small moment of pride. Today, for a few crucial minutes, he'd been the man his son believed him to be. He'd been the man Sarah had loved, strong, decisive, willing to sacrifice for others. The next morning came too soon. Sunlight streaming through curtains so thin they barely deserved the name. Ethan was already up, standing beside Caleb's bed with a bowl of cereal, the generic brand, milk carefully measured to last the week. "Breakfast in bed for the hero," Ethan announced solemnly. "Thanks, buddy. But heroes eat at tables. Come on." They were halfway through breakfast when someone knocked at the door. Caleb opened it to find Chief Patterson standing there with a woman in a suit, professional, serious, holding a tablet. "Mr. Turner, this is Amanda Collins from the mayor's office." "May we come in?" Caleb glanced back at the small living room, secondhand furniture, toys scattered on worn carpet, evidence of their struggle everywhere. Of course. They sat awkwardly on the sagging couch while Ethan peered around the corner from the kitchen. "Mr. Turner," Amanda began, "what you did last night was extraordinary. The mayor would like to recognize your heroism with a civic award, a ceremony. That's not necessary. Additionally," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken, "there's been significant interest from local media. Channel 7 wants an exclusive interview. The newspaper wants to do a feature. I said it's not necessary." His voice was firmer now. "I did what anyone would do." Chief Patterson leaned forward. "Caleb, can I call you Caleb? I've been fighting fires for 30 years. What you did wasn't what anyone would do. It was exceptional. And Morgan, Captain Hale, she wants to thank you personally. She's been asking for you since she woke up." That stopped him. "She's awake? She's okay? Concussion, smoke inhalation, some burns, bruised ribs. She'll be off duty for a while, but she'll make a full recovery. Thanks to you. I'd like to see her. Make sure she's really okay." Amanda jumped on that. "Perfect. We can arrange for media to be there, capture the reunion." "No." Caleb stood. "No media. No ceremony. If Captain Hale wants to thank me, that's between us. This isn't a photo op." After they left, Amanda clearly disappointed, Patterson seemingly approving, Caleb sat with Ethan. "Why don't you want to be on TV, Dad?" "Because that's not why we help people, son. We don't do it for praise or attention. We do it because it's right." "But you are a hero." "Everyone should know." Caleb pulled his son close. "The only person whose opinion matters to me is sitting right here. You know what I did. That's enough." That afternoon, while Ethan was at school, Caleb drove to Millbrook General. His pickup truck looked even more out of place in the hospital parking lot, surrounded by newer vehicles, but he'd long ago stopped caring about appearances. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, that universal medical scent that brought back memories of Sarah's final days. He pushed them aside, focusing on the present. Morgan's room was on the 3rd floor. He knocked softly, heard a strong voice call, "Come in." She was sitting up in bed, looking remarkably good for someone who'd nearly died 12 hours ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back, revealing a bandage on her forehead. Her eyes, green, he noticed now in proper light, were clear and alert. "Caleb Turner," she said before he could speak, "the man who ignores direct orders from fire captains. Only the ones trapped under burning beams." She smiled, and it transformed her face from merely attractive to genuinely beautiful. "Sit. Please, I've been driving the nurses crazy asking when you'd come." He took the visitor's chair, noticing how she watched him move, cataloging his injuries like he'd done with hers. "Your hands." "Just blisters." "Your head?" "Hard as rock, apparently. 8 stitches, mild concussion. Could have been so much worse." Her expression grew serious. "I need to say this properly. Thank you. You saved my life. That's not a debt that can be repaid, but there's no debt. You were doing your job, checking for people who might need help. You got hurt serving others. Helping you was just," he struggled for words, "just what needed to happen. You have a son." "Ethan, the nurses told me, said he was here earlier, brought you lunch. Kid worries too much." "He's proud of you. The whole town's proud of you. The whole town's got too much free time." She laughed, then winced, hand going to her ribs. "Don't make me laugh. Everything hurts." "Sorry." "Don't be. It's nice. Haven't had much to laugh about lately." Something shadowed her expression, there and gone. "Tell me about yourself, Caleb Turner. The nurses say you're in construction?" "When there's work. Not much building happening in Millbrook these days." "Military before that?" "You moved like someone with training." "Army, 2 tours in Iraq. Came back, got married, had Ethan. Now it's just us two." "I'm sorry." "About your wife." "Cancer, 3 years ago." He was surprised how easily he said it, how the words didn't stick in his throat like usual. "What about you?" "How does someone become a fire captain?" "Family business, sort of. Dad was a firefighter in Nashville. Died in the line when I was 15. I swore I'd never follow in his footsteps, then swore I'd honor his memory by being better, safer, smarter." She gestured to her hospital bed. "Obviously that worked out great. You went into an abandoned building to make sure no one was trapped." "That's pretty honorable." "That's the job." Or was. Again, that shadow. "I should let you go. You probably have things." "Actually, I have the day off. Apparently saving fire captains earns you a paid vacation day." "1 whole day? Wow, the city's really breaking the bank." They talked for another hour, easy conversation that felt like reconnecting with an old friend rather than meeting a stranger. She was funny, sharp, with a self-deprecating humor that reminded him of Sarah in the best way. Not physically. Sarah had been small, dark-haired, quiet, where Morgan was tall, blonde, commanding. But that same core strength, that same refusal to be beaten by circumstances. When a nurse came to check Morgan's vitals, Caleb stood to leave. "Will you come back?" Morgan asked. "Tomorrow, maybe? The days are long here, and my team's all on shift, and—" She stopped. "Sorry, you barely know me. I shouldn't ask. I'll come. After I drop Ethan at school. Bring him sometime. I'd like to meet him properly. Thank him for spotting me." Caleb nodded, something warm unfurling in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in so long he'd forgotten its name. Hope, maybe, or possibility. The next 3 days fell into a pattern. Morning drop-off with Ethan, who peppered him with questions about the firefighter lady. Visit Morgan, bringing coffee from the good place downtown because hospital coffee was an insult to the concept of beverages, as she put it. Pick up Ethan, make dinner, help with homework, then sometimes, if Mrs. Chen could watch Ethan, an evening visit to the hospital. On the 4th day, everything changed. Caleb arrived to find Morgan's room empty, the bed freshly made. Panic flared. Had something happened? Complications from the smoke inhalation? He was about to grab a nurse when he saw it. A note on the pillow, his name written in neat handwriting. "Caleb, I'm sorry for leaving like this. You saved me in more ways than one, but now I have to finish what I started. Please don't try to find me. It's safer for everyone if you don't. You're a good man, better than you know. Take care of that amazing son of yours." He He read it 3 times, confusion growing with each pass. Finish what? Safer for who? He found Morgan's nurse, who seemed equally puzzled. She checked herself out against medical advice about an hour ago, said it was urgent. I thought maybe family emergency, but the nurse shrugged. She seemed different, determined, but also scared, maybe. Caleb drove home with the note in his pocket, mind racing. Something was wrong, very wrong. Morgan didn't strike him as someone who ran from anything, yet she'd run from this. From him? From something else? At home, he did something he rarely did anymore. Opened his laptop, a dinosaur that took 5 minutes to boot up. He searched Morgan Hale Fire Department Millbrook and found what he expected. Commendations, community service, a recent promotion to captain. But then he added investigation to the search, and everything changed. 3 articles, all from the last month, buried in the back pages of online news sites. Captain Morgan Hale under investigation for inconsistencies in equipment reports, suspended pending review 2 weeks before the warehouse fire. Allegations of missing funds, though no charges filed. None of it made sense. The Morgan he'd spent days talking with wasn't a thief. She talked about integrity, duty, the responsibility of leadership. Either she was the best actress he'd ever met, or his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Caleb? Morgan's voice, but different, strained. I shouldn't be calling, but I had to. Are you okay? Has anyone approached you? Morgan, what's going on? Where are you? I can't. Just listen, please. Stay away from this. From me. What happened at the warehouse wasn't an accident. Someone wanted me dead, and they might, if they think you know something, know what? Morgan, you're not making sense. I found something about the equipment funds. They weren't stolen, they were redirected. Someone high up is selling department resources, pocketing the money. I have proof, but a pause. Voices in the background. I have to go. Take care of yourself, Caleb. Take care of Ethan. Forget you knew me. The line went dead. Caleb stared at his phone, then at the note, then at the articles on his screen. A corruption investigation. A convenient fire. A captain who nearly died in a building she shouldn't have been in if she was suspended. He thought about walking away. He had Ethan to think about, bills to pay, a life that didn't need more complications. Morgan had told him to forget her, stay safe, be smart, but he kept seeing her eyes through the smoke, that moment of connection. She'd tried to save him even while dying. He'd carried her from hell. That created a bond, whether they wanted it or not. That evening, as he helped Ethan with math homework, his son asked, "Is the firefighter lady okay? You look worried." "She's going to be fine, buddy." "Are you going to see her again?" Caleb considered his answer. "I don't know. Sometimes adults have complicated problems. Like when Mom was sick." "Different kind of complicated." Ethan nodded solemnly, then returned to his fractions. But a few minutes later he said, "Dad, I think you should help her." "Why's that?" "Because that's what heroes do. They help people, even when it's hard, even when they're scared. That's what you told me, out of the mouths of babes." That night, after Ethan was asleep, Caleb made a decision. He couldn't fight corruption or investigation or whatever Morgan was running from, but he could try to find her, make sure she was safe, offer whatever help a broke construction worker could provide. He started with what he knew. Morgan had mentioned her team couldn't visit because they were on shift, but one of them might know something. The next morning, after dropping Ethan at school, he drove to Fire Station 19. It was a modest building, red brick and practical design, 3 engines visible through the open bay doors. Several firefighters were checking equipment. One looked up as Caleb approached. "Help you?" "I'm looking for information about Captain Hale. I'm Caleb Turner." "The hero!" The firefighter's demeanor changed instantly. "Man, what you did was incredible. I'm Rodriguez. I work under Captain Hale. Is she okay? We heard she left the hospital, but nobody's seen her." "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Rodriguez glanced around, then motioned Caleb away from the others. "Look, something's not right. This whole investigation is garbage. Captain Hale is the straightest arrow you'll ever meet. She found discrepancies in the equipment budget, reported it up the chain, and suddenly she's the one under investigation. Who did she report it to?" Deputy Chief Morrison. Guy's been here 15 years, tight with the mayor, city council, all the power players. Rodriguez lowered his voice further. Word is, Morrison's been skimming for years. Small amounts, stuff that could be explained as accounting errors. But the captain, she's got a mind like a computer. She noticed patterns. And Morrison tried to have her killed? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying anything. But that warehouse fire? The captain wasn't supposed to be there. She was suspended. But someone called in a tip about homeless people inside, specifically requested her. She went because that's who she is. Suspension or not, she wasn't letting people die. Only there was no one inside. Exactly. And then the building just happens to collapse right when she's in there? After the radio system just happens to fail? Rodriguez shook his head. Too many coincidences. Where would she go? If she was running, hiding? Her dad had a cabin up near Whitaker Lake. She mentioned it once, said she went there to think. But Mr. Turner, Caleb, be careful. If Morrison's dirty, he's got connections. Cops, city officials. You can't trust anyone. Caleb thanked Rodriguez and left, mind made up. He'd drive to Whitaker Lake, find Morgan, convince her to stop running. They'd figure out the rest together. First, though, he needed to arrange care for Ethan. He called Mrs. Chen, explaining he had an emergency job interview out of town, not entirely a lie, and might be gone overnight. She agreed immediately, wouldn't even discuss payment. The drive to Whitaker Lake took 2 hours, winding through Tennessee hills that grew more isolated with each mile. His truck wheezed up the steeper grades, but it kept moving. The lake appeared suddenly around a bend, silver blue and peaceful, cabins dotting its shore like scattered toys. Finding the Hale cabin took another hour of asking at the single general store, the elderly owner finally remembering Jim Hale's place, and providing vague directions involving landmarks like the big oak that got hit by lightning and where the old Henderson dock used to be. But finally, there it was, a modest log cabin set back from the water, barely visible through thick pines. No car out front, no lights despite the approaching dusk. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe she wasn't here. He knocked anyway. No answer. Knocked again, called out, "Morgan, it's Caleb. I just want to talk." Nothing. He was about to leave when he heard it. Movement inside, careful, trying to be quiet. "Morgan, I know you're in there. I'm alone. Rodriguez told me about Morrison, about the investigation. Let me help." "Go away, Caleb." Her voice came through the door, tired, defeated. "Please, just go." "Not happening. I didn't pull you out of a fire just to let you face this alone." "You don't understand? Then explain it to me." "Open the door and explain." A long pause. Then locks turning. Multiple locks, he noticed. And the door opened. Morgan looked terrible, still in the clothes she'd left the hospital in, hair unwashed, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. Maybe she hadn't. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but stepped aside to let him in. The cabin was sparse but clean, clearly a place for fishing trips and weekend getaways, not long-term residents. A laptop sat open on the small dining table, surrounded by papers, printouts, what looked like financial records. "This is everything," Morgan said, gesturing to the mess. 3 years of diverted funds, almost $200,000 in equipment that was purchased but never delivered, repairs that were billed but never performed. Morrison was smart about it, spread it out, used different vendors. But once you see the pattern, you have proof? Emails, invoices, shipping records that don't match receiving records. Enough to bury him. But he knows I have it, and he's got the entire city government thinking I'm the thief. If I try to take this to the authorities, who do I trust? The police chief golfs with Morrison every Sunday. The mayor's his cousin. The district attorney owes his job to their political machine. "So what's your plan? Hide here forever?" "I don't know." The words exploded out of her, months of frustration and fear finally breaking through. "I thought if I gathered enough evidence, I could go to the state police, maybe the FBI. But Morrison's not stupid. He's probably already covering his tracks, destroying evidence. And that fire. He tried to kill me, Caleb. He actually tried to kill me." Which is why you can't do this alone. Caleb moved to the table, looking at the papers. What if we could prove he set the fire? That's attempted murder. FBI would have to get involved then. How? The fire's been ruled accidental, bad wiring in an old building. But you were specifically called there. Rodriguez said someone requested you. Morgan's eyes sharpened. The call. Oh my God, the call came through dispatch. There'd be a record, but Morrison's probably, maybe not. If he thought you were dead, why bother covering that track? They looked at each other, hope flickering for the first time. It's still dangerous, Morgan said. If we go back, if we start digging, then we'd better be smart about it. Caleb pulled out his phone. And we'd better have backup. He called Rodriguez, put him on speaker. We need help. Can you get the dispatch recording from the night of the fire? Captain? Captain, is that you? Thank God. Yeah, I can try. My girlfriend works dispatch, but if Morrison finds out, he won't. We're going to end this, Rodriguez, but we need that recording. After they hung up, Morgan slumped in a chair. I can't believe you're doing this. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you ran into a burning building while suspended because you thought someone needed help. I know you've been fighting corruption alone for months. I know you tried to protect me even when you were literally dying. He sat across from her. I know you're one of the good ones, Morgan. And good people shouldn't have to fight alone. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Sarah was lucky to have you. I was lucky to have her. But she's gone, and I've spent 3 years just existing, not living, saving you. It reminded me who I used to be, who I want to be for my son. He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. So let me help. Please. Morgan turned her hand palm up, interlaced their fingers. Okay, but we do this smart. No unnecessary risks. You have a son to think about, and you have a department that needs you back. A city that needs honest people in positions of authority. They spent the next hours planning. Morgan would stay at the cabin for now, safer if Morrison didn't know where she was. Caleb would return to town, act normal, but quietly gather information. Rodriguez would work on getting the dispatch recording. They'd build their case piece by piece, then take it simultaneously to the FBI and the media. Harder to bury that way. As Caleb prepared to leave, Morgan walked him to his truck. Caleb? Be careful, Morrison's dangerous, and if he suspects you're helping me, I'll be fine. I'm just a construction worker who happened to save someone. Nobody important. You're important to me. The words hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Before he could respond, she rose up on her toes and kissed his cheek. Thank you for everything. The drive back to Millbrook felt both eternal and too quick. His mind raced through everything that had happened, everything that might happen. By the time he picked up Ethan from Mrs. Chen's, he'd made a decision. They were going to see this through, whatever it took. Did you get the job, Dad? Ethan asked as they walked home. What job? The emergency interview Mrs. Chen said you had. Oh, right. It's complicated. But things are going to get better, buddy, I promise. Because of the firefighter lady? Sometimes his son's perception amazed him. Yeah, because of her. That night, as Ethan slept, Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. Got it. The call requesting Captain Hale came from a burner phone, but dispatch caught something interesting. Background noise on the call, Morrison's voice, talking to someone about tomorrow's golf game. He didn't even try to hide it. Caleb smiled grimly. They had him. Or at least they had a start. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Caleb was at a job site trying to focus on framing a wall when Chief Patterson approached. Turner, need a word. They stepped away from the other workers, Patterson's expression unreadable. Morrison's been asking about you, the chief said quietly, wanting to know about your relationship with Captain Hale. I told him you barely knew her, just a hero doing his duty, but he's suspicious. Of what? I saved someone from a fire. End of story. We both know it's not the end. Patterson looked around, ensuring they weren't overheard. I've been fire chief for 20 years. I know when equipment goes missing. I know when funds don't add up. I also know when to keep my mouth shut to keep my job, feed my family. So you let Morrison, I documented everything, every discrepancy, every suspicious transaction. It's all in a safety deposit box at First National, box 447. He pressed a key into Caleb's hand. I was a coward, afraid of losing my pension, my reputation. But Morgan, she had courage I didn't. If she's building a case, she'll need this. Why give it to me? Why now? Because Morrison tried to kill one of my firefighters. Because I'm 3 months from retirement and I'm tired of being afraid. And because sometimes God sends you a sign, like a construction worker running into hell to save someone, that it's time to do the right thing. Patterson walked away without another word, leaving Caleb with a key that felt heavier than any beam he'd ever lifted. The safety deposit box key burned in Caleb's pocket as he finished his shift, every instinct screaming at him to race to the bank immediately. But Morrison had eyes everywhere, and a construction worker suddenly visiting a bank in the middle of the day would raise questions. He forced himself to wait, to plan, to be the soldier he'd once been rather than the desperate man he felt like now. That evening, after tucking Ethan into bed with promises that everything was fine, just grown-up stuff, Caleb called Morgan from his truck, parked 3 blocks from his house in case anyone was listening. Patterson gave you what? Her voice crackled through the cheap phone, but he could hear the excitement beneath the static. Everything, apparently. 20 years of documentation. He's been keeping records all along, too scared to use them, but too smart to destroy them. Caleb, this changes everything. With Patterson's evidence plus mine, we have enough to bury Morrison and anyone else involved. There's more. Rodriguez overheard something today. Morrison's planning to leave town this weekend. Some kind of emergency family situation, supposedly, but Rodriguez thinks he's running. Then we need to move fast. Can you get to the bank tomorrow? First thing in the morning. But Morgan, I think you should come back. If we're going to do this, we need to do it together. A long pause, then, you're right. I'll drive down tonight, but I can't go to my apartment. Morrison probably has someone watching it. Come to my place. Caleb, that could put you and Ethan in danger. You're already in danger. At least at my place, we can watch each other's backs. Plus, Ethan's been asking about you non-stop. Kid's got it in his head that you're some kind of superhero. I'm nobody's hero. I'm just a firefighter who stumbled onto something bigger than she could handle. You're wrong about that, but we can argue about it when you get here. Park around back, there's an old shed that'll hide your car. 4 hours later, just past midnight, Caleb heard the soft knock he'd been waiting for. Morgan stood at his back door carrying a backpack and looking like she'd aged years in the few days since he'd seen her. Without thinking, he pulled her into a hug, feeling her tense, then gradually relax against him. Thank you, she whispered into his shoulder. I didn't realize how tired I was of being alone in this. You're not alone anymore. They sat at his kitchen table, the same one where Ethan did homework and where Sarah used to plan their weeks, spreading out Morgan's evidence alongside notes about Patterson's safety deposit box. The picture that emerged was staggering. Not just Morrison, but 3 city councilmen, the deputy mayor, and at least 2 police lieutenants were implicated in various schemes. This is bigger than just skimming fire department funds, Morgan said, pointing to a pattern in the transactions. Look at these amounts. They match up with city construction contracts that went to Morrison's brother-in-law's company. The same company that underbid everyone else for the warehouse renovation, Caleb added, pieces clicking together. The warehouse that conveniently burned down with you inside. They must have been using it for something. Storage, maybe? For the equipment they were supposedly buying but never delivered? We need to check the ruins. If there's evidence there, it's too dangerous. Morrison will have people watching. Not at 4 a.m, he won't. Caleb met her eyes. I spent 2 tours doing reconnaissance in hostile territory. I think I can handle sneaking around a burned building in Millbrook, Tennessee. This isn't Iraq, Caleb. You can't just... Actually, I can. And I will. Because every day we wait is another day Morrison has to cover his tracks or disappear entirely. He reached across the table, took her hand. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. Before she could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Ethan appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes, then freezing when he saw Morgan. The firefighter lady! Dad, you found her! Hey, buddy. Sorry we woke you, but Ethan was already moving toward Morgan, his 8-year-old sense of propriety warring with obvious excitement. Morgan solved his dilemma by opening her arms, and he flew into them. "I was worried about you," Ethan said into her shoulder. "Dad was too, but he pretends he's not worried about stuff." "Is that right?" Morgan looked at Caleb over Ethan's head, eyebrow raised. "Kid's got an overactive imagination." "Nah, you checked your phone like 100 times a day and you had that face, the one you get when you're thinking about Mom." Caleb felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Okay, time for bed, buddy. Captain Hale needs to rest." "Is she staying here? Are you going to catch the bad guys? Can I help?" Yes, and absolutely not," Caleb said, scooping Ethan up despite his protest that he was too big to be carried. "This is grown-up stuff." "Everything's grown-up stuff," Ethan grumbled, but he was smiling as Caleb tucked him back into bed. When Caleb returned to the kitchen, Morgan was staring at the evidence with an expression he couldn't read. "He's amazing," she said softly, "just like his dad." "He gets it from his mother. Sarah was the amazing one. Tell me about her." So he did, surprising himself with how easily the words came. He talked about meeting Sarah in college, how she'd tutored him through calculus because he was hopeless with numbers but too proud to admit it, their wedding in her parents' backyard, her insistence on wildflowers instead of roses because love should be wild, not cultivated. The joy and terror of Ethan's birth, Sarah's strength through 18 hours of labor. And finally, the diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months if they were lucky. "She got 8 months, Caleb said, voice rough. 8 months of smiling for Ethan, of pretending she wasn't in agony, of making videos for his birthdays she'd never see. She was the strongest person I've ever known. She'd be proud of you, of what you're doing now." "I'm not so sure about that." Sarah was practical. She'd probably tell me to stay out of it, keep my head down, focus on raising Ethan. "But you can't do that, can you? Because that's not who you are." "I didn't know who I was anymore. After Sarah died, after I left the army, I just existed. Worked, came home, took care of Ethan, repeat. Then I saw you in that building, and something woke up. The part of me that fights, that protects, that refuses to let the bad guys win." Morgan moved around the table, sat beside him instead of across. "I know the feeling. After my dad died, I was so angry. At him for running into that building, at the world for taking him, at myself for not being able to save him. Becoming a firefighter was supposed to give me control, make sense of the chaos. Instead, I found corruption and cowardice and—" She gestured at the papers. "This. But you didn't look away. You could have ignored it, kept your head down like everyone else." "Like Patterson, you mean?" "Patterson's trying to make it right now. That matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, then Morgan said, "We should sleep. Big day tomorrow." Caleb gave her his bed, insisting on taking the couch despite her protests. But sleep eluded him. Every creak of the house had him reaching for the baseball bat he'd placed beside the couch. Every passing car made him wonder if Morrison had found them. At 3:30 a.m., he gave up and got dressed in dark clothes. Morgan was already up, sitting on his bed fully clothed. "I couldn't sleep either," she admitted. "If you're going to the warehouse, I'm coming with you." Morgan, non-negotiable. Partners, remember? They left a note for Ethan in case he woke up, then slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The streets of Millbrook were empty, sodium lights casting everything in sickly orange. The warehouse ruins stood behind temporary fencing, crime scene tape long since removed, but the area still officially off limits. Caleb found a gap in the fence, held it open for Morgan. The smell of char and chemicals still hung in the air, making them both suppress coughs. They picked their way carefully through the debris, using small flashlights to navigate. "What are we looking for exactly?" Morgan whispered. "I don't know, but if they were storing stolen equipment here..." His flashlight beam caught something, a partially melted metal plate with serial numbers still visible. Then another, and another. Fire equipment, medical supplies, things that should have been in Millbrook's emergency vehicles, but were instead piled in a burned warehouse. "Holy shit," Morgan breathed. "This is it. This is evidence of..." A car door slammed nearby, then another. Flashlight beams larger than theirs swept the ruins. "Move," Caleb hissed. grabbing Morgan's hand and pulling her behind a collapsed wall section. "Sure, I saw lights," a voice was saying. Not Morrison. Younger, nervous. "Check anyway. Boss says nobody gets near this place until the demolition crew comes Thursday." Thursday. 2 days to destroy all the evidence. Caleb and Morgan pressed themselves against the burned wall, barely breathing as footsteps crunched through debris nearby. The beam of a flashlight passed inches from their hiding spot. Then Caleb's phone vibrated. He'd forgotten to silence it. The sound was tiny, barely audible, but in the pre-dawn quiet, it might as well have been a siren. What was that? Probably rats. Place is full of them. I hate this. Guarding a burned building for that psycho Morrison? Shut up. You want to end up like the fire captain? The footsteps moved away, but Caleb and Morgan stayed frozen for another 10 minutes before carefully extracting themselves. They took a different route out, Caleb memorizing the location of the evidence they'd found. Back at the house, adrenaline still coursing through them, they found Ethan awake, making cereal. "You went on an adventure without me," he accused. "How did you—" "Your boots are dirty with ash. Morgan has cobwebs in her hair, and you both look like you saw a ghost." He took a bite of cereal. "Did you find clues?" Morgan laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "Your kid should be a detective." "Found some." "But Ethan, this is serious. You can't tell anyone about Morgan being here or what we're doing." "I know, Dad. I'm 8, not stupid." He looked at Morgan. "Are you going to marry my dad?" Caleb nearly choked on air. "Ethan!" "What?" "Jenny Patterson's mom says you two have chemistry. I don't know what that means, but it sounds important." Morgan's face was red, but she was smiling. "Your dad and I are just friends, Ethan. We're working together to stop some bad people. That's how Superman and Lois Lane started, too." "Okay, that's enough from you," Caleb said, but he caught Morgan's eye and saw his own complicated feelings reflected there: attraction, possibility, and the terrible timing of it all. After Ethan left for school, Mrs. Chen, walking him, arranged hastily with a story about an early work call, Caleb and Morgan headed to the bank. First National was old-fashioned, all marble and dark wood, trying to project stability in an unstable world. The safety deposit box area required privacy, which worked in their favor. Caleb signed in with Patterson's key, was led to a small room, and left alone with box 447. Inside were 3 folders, each meticulously organized. Patterson hadn't just documented Morrison's crimes, he'd built an airtight case. Receipts, emails, photographs of equipment that was supposedly purchased but never delivered, even recorded conversations from department meetings where Morrison discussed budget allocations. "This is enough," Morgan said, photographing everything with her phone. "With this plus what we found at the warehouse, we can end him. We need to move fast. Those guards said demolition is Thursday. Once that evidence is gone, I know someone at the FBI, regional office in Nashville, Maria Santos. We went to academy together before she went federal. I'll call her now." While Morgan made the call, Caleb kept watch, half expecting Morrison to burst through the door. But the bank remained quiet, normal people doing normal banking things, unaware of the conspiracy being unraveled in their midst. "She'll meet us," Morgan said, ending the call. "Tomorrow morning, Nashville FBI office. She says to bring everything and to be careful. Morrison's got friends in local law enforcement." They returned the box, left the bank separately, met back at Caleb's house. The day stretched ahead, endless hours before their meeting with the FBI. Hours where Morrison might discover what they were doing, might decide to tie up loose ends. "We should pack," Caleb said, "in case we need to leave quickly." "You think Morrison would come after us here?" "I think Morrison tried to burn you alive. I'm not underestimating what he'd do to protect himself." They spent the afternoon preparing, copying documents, uploading evidence to cloud storage, creating multiple backups. Ethan came home from school to find them surrounded by papers, immediately demanding to help. "You can help by being normal," Caleb told him. "If anyone asks, everything's fine." "Everything is fine," Ethan said confidently. "You and Morgan are going to win. Good guys always win." "That's movies, buddy. Real life is more complicated." "No, it's not. You're good. Morrison's bad. You'll win." He looked at Morgan. Right? Right, she said, but Caleb heard the uncertainty beneath the word. That evening, as Caleb cooked dinner, actual food this time, chicken and vegetables, Morgan had insisted on buying groceries. His phone rang. Unknown number. Turner. Morrison's voice was smooth, friendly, nothing like what Caleb expected from a cornered criminal. Dennis Morrison, I understand you're the hero who saved Captain Hale. Just did what anyone would do. Humble. I like that. Listen, I'd like to thank you properly. The city wants to give you a commendation, maybe a reward. Can you come by my office tomorrow? Say, 9 o'clock? The same time as their FBI meeting. Not a coincidence. I appreciate the offer, but I've got work. I really must insist. See, Captain Hale has been spreading some unfortunate rumors about me, and I'd hate for you to get caught up in her delusions. She's been under a lot of stress, you understand. The fire, the investigation into her theft. She didn't steal anything. A pause. When Morrison spoke again, the friendliness was gone. Careful, Turner. You have a son to think about. Single parent, struggling to make ends meet. Be a shame if Child Services got an anonymous tip about unsafe living conditions. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you an opportunity to do the right thing. Come to my office tomorrow. Alone. We'll discuss how you can help resolve this situation peacefully. The line went dead. Morgan had heard everything, Caleb's phone loud enough in the quiet kitchen. Her face was pale but determined. He knows, she said. He knows we're working together. Which means we can't wait for tomorrow. We need to go to the FBI tonight. It's after hours. Then we go to the media. Channel 7, the newspaper, everyone. Make it public before Morrison can stop us. Ethan appeared in the doorway. I heard shouting. Are the bad guys coming? Caleb wanted to lie, to protect his son's innocence a little longer, but Ethan deserved truth. Maybe. Which means you're going to stay with Mrs. Chen tonight. No! I want to stay with you and Morgan. This isn't negotiable, buddy. Caleb knelt beside his son. Remember what we talked about? Sometimes being brave means letting other people protect you. But who protects you? I do, Morgan said firmly. I protect your dad, and he protects me. That's what partners do. Within an hour, Ethan was at Mrs. Chen's, tearfully brave about the separation. Caleb and Morgan sat in his truck outside the Channel 7 news station, watching the evening broadcast through the window. Once we do this, there's no going back, Morgan said. There's already no going back. Morrison made sure of that when he threatened Ethan. They walked in together, asked for the news director, were almost turned away until Morgan identified herself as the fire captain from the warehouse rescue. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to them. The news director, a sharp woman named Patricia Vance, listened to their story with growing excitement and horror. She examined their evidence, made calls to verify details, then made a decision that would change everything. We go live in an hour. Exclusive interview, all the evidence on screen. Can you do that? Caleb and Morgan looked at each other, then nodded. One condition, Morgan said. We need protection. Once this airs, Morrison will be desperate. Already arranged. I've got connections with state police. They'll have units here and at your residences within 30 minutes. The next hour passed in a blur. Makeup, which Caleb resisted until Morgan pointed out that looking credible on TV might save their lives. Microphone checks. Producers coaching them on what to say, how to say it. Then they were sitting across from Lance Sterling, Channel 7's lead anchor, and the red light on the camera turned on. Good evening. We interrupt our regular programming for an exclusive investigation into corruption at the highest levels of Millbrook City government. With me tonight are Captain Morgan Hale of the Millbrook Fire Department and Caleb Turner, the local hero who saved Captain Hale from the warehouse fire 5 days ago. What they're about to reveal will shock you. Morgan spoke first, her voice steady despite everything. She laid out the corruption, the missing funds, the equipment that was never delivered. She showed documents, presented evidence, named names. Then Caleb talked about the fire, about finding evidence at the warehouse, about Morrison's threats just hours ago. Deputy Chief Morrison attempted to murder Captain Hale to silence her, Caleb said, looking directly into the camera. When that failed, he threatened my 8-year-old son. This isn't just about missing money. It's about a man willing to kill to protect his crimes. Lance Sterling asked probing questions, had their evidence examined on air by the station's investigative team. Everything held up. The interview stretched to 30 minutes, then 45. They were just wrapping up when Caleb's phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen texting frantically. "Strange car outside." "Men watching house. What should I do?" Before Caleb could respond, the station's doors burst open. Not Morrison. Federal agents, badges out, weapons visible but not drawn. "Captain Hale, Mr. Turner, we need you to come with us, now." "Are we under arrest?" Morgan demanded. "Protective custody. Morrison's been arrested, but he made bail. We have credible intelligence he sent people after you and your families. My son, already secured." "He's safe, Mr. Turner, but we need to move." They were hustled into black SUVs, separated despite their protests. Caleb found himself in a vehicle with Agent Santos, the friend Morgan had mentioned. "Where's my son?" he demanded. "Safe house, about 20 minutes from here. He's fine, playing video games with one of our agents. Kid's got a mean Mario Kart game." "And Morgan?" "Different location. Security protocol. Morrison's got at least 6 accomplices on the loose. We need to keep you separated until we round them all up." The safe house was a nondescript ranch home in a suburban neighborhood. Ethan rushed into Caleb's arms the moment he walked in, clinging like he hadn't since Sarah's funeral. "I was brave, Dad," he whispered, "but I was really scared." "Me too, buddy. Me too." They spent 3 days in protective custody. 3 days of board games with federal agents, of Ethan beating everyone at cards, of Caleb pacing and wondering about Morgan. Santos gave him updates. Morrison arrested on federal charges, 4 conspirators in custody, 2 still at large. The evidence from the warehouse secured before demolition, Patterson testifying to a grand jury. On the 4th day, Santos announced it was safe to go home. Morrison had taken a plea deal, 20 years in federal prison in exchange for testifying against the others. The 2 remaining conspirators had fled the state but were being tracked. "Captain Hale's at your house," Santos added with a knowing smile. "Insisted on being the one to tell you the news." Caleb found Morgan sitting on his front porch, still in the same clothes from the interview, looking exhausted but smiling. "We did it," she said simply. "You did it. You started this fight. You finished it. I couldn't have done this without you." Ethan burst out of the truck, launching himself at Morgan. "You're okay." Dad was so worried he barely ate anything, and he kept looking out the window like you might magically appear. "Okay, that's enough from the peanut gallery," Caleb interrupted, but he was smiling. They went inside, their little house feeling like a mansion after the safe house. Caleb made coffee while Morgan and Ethan played cards, their laughter filling spaces that had been empty too long. Later, after Ethan was in bed, Caleb and Morgan sat on the porch, watching stars appear in the clear Tennessee sky. "So what now?" Caleb asked. "Patterson's retiring. They offered me the chief position." "Morgan, that's amazing. You deserve it." "Maybe, but I'm not sure I want it. Not sure I want to stay in Millbrook at all. Too many bad memories now." "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere fresh, somewhere I could start over." She turned to look at him. "What about you? Hero of Millbrook, you could probably get any job you want now." "Still got bills to pay." "Still got a son to raise." Caleb Turner, always practical. "Someone has to be." She leaned against his shoulder, and he put his arm around her, natural as breathing. They sat like that, comfortable in shared silence, until Morgan spoke again. "That night, in the fire, when you found me, I'd given up. I thought I was going to die alone in that warehouse, that Morrison had won. Then you appeared out of the smoke like some avenging angel, and I thought I was hallucinating. I'm no angel. No, you're better. You're real. You're good and decent and brave, and you love your son more than life itself, and you ran into hell for a stranger because it was the right thing to do." "It wasn't for a stranger," Caleb said quietly. "The moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. Like Sarah used to say, sometimes souls know each other even when the people just met." Morgan lifted her head to look at him, and then they were kissing, soft and careful at first, then deeper as months of loneliness and fear transformed into something better, something hopeful. When they pulled apart, Morgan was crying. "I'm sorry," she said. It's been so long since anything felt good or right or... I know, God, I know. They went inside, curled together on his ancient couch, talking until dawn about everything and nothing. About Sarah and Morgan's father, about Ethan and the future, about dreams deferred and second chances. "Stay," Caleb said as the sun painted the sky pink and gold. "Take the chief job. Help us rebuild this town into something better." "What about us? What would we be?" "Whatever we want. Whatever feels right. No rush, no pressure. Just possibility." Morgan was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, "Okay. Okay? I'll stay. I'll take the job. I'll see where this goes." She looked up at him. "But I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more running into burning buildings. I'm the firefighter in this relationship." "Relationship? Shut up. You know what I mean. I promise. Unless you're in the building, then all bets are off." "My hero," she said, half mocking, all affectionate. "My firefighter," he replied and kissed her again as Millbrook woke up around them. The town forever changed by a construction worker who ran toward danger and a fire captain who refused to look away from corruption. 6 months later, at Morgan's official installation as fire chief, Caleb stood in the crowd with Ethan on his shoulders, watching the woman who'd changed their lives take her oath of office. She caught his eye during her speech, smiled that smile that had become as essential as breathing. "That's our Morgan," Ethan said proudly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yeah, buddy," Caleb agreed, thinking of Sarah, thinking of second chances, thinking of the moment he'd chosen to run toward the fire instead of away. "That's our Morgan." The investigation made national news. Morrison's conviction led to a complete overhaul of Millbrook's government, with emergency elections bringing in reform candidates. The fire department got its missing equipment, and then some, funded by assets seized from the conspirators. Patterson, granted immunity for his cooperation, donated his entire pension to a fund for fallen firefighters' families. Rodriguez got promoted to captain, taking over Morgan's old position. He still called Caleb hero every time they met, which was often now that Caleb's construction company had the contract to rebuild the warehouse. This time as affordable housing, as originally intended. The company was small but growing. Turned out being a nationally recognized hero was good for business. Caleb hired veterans, single parents, people who needed second chances. Sarah would have been proud. But the best part was the evenings. Morgan at the kitchen table, helping Ethan with homework while Caleb cooked. He'd gotten better, YouTube tutorials and Morgan's patient coaching working miracles. The three of them settling in for movie night, Ethan invariably falling asleep between them, safe and loved and whole. "No regrets?" Morgan asked one night as they stood in the backyard watching fireflies dance in the summer heat. "About what?" "Running into that fire." Everything that came after. Caleb pulled her close, breathed in the scent of her shampoo, smoke long since washed away, but the memory lingering like a foundation for everything built since. "Best decision I ever made," he said, and meant it. "Even though I almost got you killed?" "Even though. Because here's the thing about fires. They destroy, but they also clear the way for new growth. That warehouse had to burn for us to find each other, for Morrison to be exposed, for this town to heal. That's very poetic for a construction worker. I have depths." "Yes," she agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "You do." The fireflies weren't the only things lighting up that summer evening. Caleb's phone buzzed with an unknown number, and something in his gut, that same instinct that had saved him in Iraq, told him to answer it away from Morgan and Ethan. "Turner?" The voice was gravelly, unfamiliar, definitely not local. "Who is this?" Someone who knows Morrison didn't work alone. Someone who knows the real story hasn't been told yet. A pause, the sound of traffic in the background. "Meet me at the Old Dixon Bridge tonight, midnight. Come alone, or the information dies with me." The line went dead before Caleb could respond. He stood there, phone in hand, watching Morgan push Ethan on the swing he'd built last month, their laughter carrying across the yard like music. 6 months of peace, of building something good from the ashes of that terrible night. Now this. Everything okay? Morgan had noticed him standing apart, her firefighter's instincts still sharp even in civilian clothes. Yeah, just a client asking about tomorrow's work. The lie came too easily, but he couldn't risk worrying her over what might be nothing, couldn't risk her trying to come with him if it was something. But Morgan knew him now, knew his tells. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't push, not in front of Ethan. Later, after Ethan was asleep, she cornered him in the kitchen. What's really going on? I got a call. Someone claiming to have information about Morrison's operation. Morrison's in federal prison. His conspirators are either locked up or on the run. It's over. What if it's not? What if we only got the surface players? Morgan grabbed his shoulders, forced him to look at her. Then we call Santos. We call the FBI. We don't go running off to meet mysterious informants at midnight like this is some spy movie. He said, come alone. They always say that, right before someone ends up dead under a bridge. Her voice cracked slightly. Caleb, please. We've been through enough. Ethan's been through enough. She was right, of course. The smart move was to call the authorities, let them handle it. But something in the caller's voice, desperation mixed with determination, reminded him of Morgan that night in the cabin, alone with evidence that could destroy her. I have to go, he said quietly. But not alone. I'll call Rodriguez, have him shadow me. First sign of trouble, we call in everyone. I'm coming too. Morgan, non-negotiable. You saved me from a burning building. Least I can do is watch your back at a bridge. She pulled out her phone. I'll get Mrs. Chen to stay with Ethan. The Dixon Bridge had been closed for 3 years, declared structurally unsound after decades of Tennessee winters and too little maintenance. It sat 5 miles outside town, surrounded by woods that pressed close and dark. The kind of place where bad things happened and nobody heard the screams. Rodriguez was already there when they arrived, parked in the shadows with his lights off. He jogged over to Caleb's truck, looking grim. This is stupid. You know that, right? Noted, Caleb said. You see anyone else? Nobody. But there's a lot of places to hide out here. They waited, windows down to hear approaching vehicles, weapons within reach, Caleb's baseball bat, Morgan's department-issued sidearm that she wasn't supposed to have as a chief but carried anyway, Rodriguez's off-duty piece. At 11:58, headlights appeared, moving slowly, almost reluctantly. An older sedan, rust eating at the wheel wells, Tennessee plates covered in mud. It parked 20 feet away, engine running. The man who got out looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 6 months. Caleb recognized him, Detective Ray Hutchins, one of Morrison's poker buddies, supposedly clean but never quite passing the smell test. Hutchins? Morgan stepped out of the truck, hand near her weapon. You're the informant? I know what you think of me, Hutchins said, hands visible but shaking slightly. Morrison's friend, probably dirty, looked the other way when I should have spoken up. All true. But I never knew about the fire, never knew he'd try to kill you. Why should we believe you, Satit? Rodriguez demanded. Because I'm here, aren't I? Because I could have kept my mouth shut and retired with my pension intact. Because, he took a shuddering breath, because my daughter just joined the fire department in Memphis. And every time I look at her in uniform, I see you trapped in that warehouse, Captain Hale. I can't live with it anymore. So talk, Caleb said. What do you know? Hutchins reached slowly into his jacket, pulled out a flash drive. Everything. Morrison was middle management, the face of the operation. The real power came from above. City level, state level. People you haven't even looked at. Names, Morgan demanded. Judge Franklin Morse, for one. He made sure any cases that might expose the operation got dismissed or delayed. State Senator Rebecca Williams, she secured the funding that Morrison diverted, made sure the right committees looked the other way. Jesus, Rodriguez whispered. How deep does this go? All the way to Nashville. Maybe further. Hutchins held out the flash drive. Bank records, recorded conversations, photographs from meetings they thought were secret. I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, too scared to use it, too guilty to destroy it. Morgan took the drive, turned it over in her hands like it might explode. Why now? Why not 6 months ago when we could have used this? Because 6 months ago, I was still a coward. Because it took watching you almost die, then seeing you and Turner stand up on live TV, risking everything for the truth. His voice broke. My daughter called me after your interview, said she was proud someone in law enforcement finally had the courage to do the right thing. She didn't know how many times I could have done the right thing and chose my pension instead. This Judge Morse, Caleb said, something clicking in his memory. He signed the warrant for Morgan's apartment search, didn't he? During the investigation? He signed everything Morrison needed. Warrants, injunctions, gag orders. He's the reason Morrison's out on bail right now instead of rotting in federal holding. Morrison's not out on bail, Morgan said. He's in federal prison. 20-year sentence. Hutchins' face went white. No, he's not. He was released yesterday, pending appeal. Judge Morse signed the order. That's why I called you. Morrison's free, and he's planning something. I heard him on a call this morning telling someone to finish what we started with the firefighter. The words hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire, toxic and choking. Morgan's hand found Caleb's, gripped tight. We need to go, Rodriguez said urgently. If Morrison's out... The gunshot cut him off, bark exploding from a tree inches from his head. Then chaos, more shots, muzzle flashes in the darkness, Hutchins screaming and falling, blood spreading across his shirt. Get down! Caleb tackled Morgan behind his truck as windows shattered above them. Rodriguez was returning fire, trying to cover Hutchins as he crawled towards safety. How many? Morgan shouted over the gunfire. 3, maybe 4. Rodriguez's magazine ran empty. He ducked down to reload. They've got us pinned. Caleb's mind shifted into combat mode, Iraq training taking over. 3 vehicles for cover, his truck, Hutchins' sedan, Rodriguez's car. Shooters in the tree line, elevated position, probably been there all along. They needed to move, needed help, needed... The bridge, he said suddenly. Under the bridge, there's cover, and they can't get an angle. That's 30 feet of open ground. Not if we use the cars. He grabbed Morgan's face, made her focus on him. You trust me? Always. Rodriguez, start your car, ram it toward the trees. We'll use it for moving cover. Rodriguez didn't hesitate, military recognizing military. He dove into his vehicle, started it, threw it in drive. The car lurched forward, drawing fire, and Caleb pulled Morgan up, running beside the moving vehicle, using it as a shield. Hutchins was trying to follow when another shot dropped him. He didn't get back up. They made it to the bridge abutment, concrete pillars providing blessed cover. Rodriguez's car, riddled with bullets, rolled to a stop 50 feet away. Hutchins, Morgan called out. No response. In the sudden quiet, they could hear footsteps approaching, careful but confident. Captain Hale! Morrison's voice echoed off the old bridge supports. Should have stayed dead the first time. Would have been cleaner for everyone. How many people did you bring to kill 3 people, Morrison? Morgan shouted back. Losing your touch? Just enough. Judge Morse was very specific. No witnesses, no evidence, no bodies to find. Just 3 more casualties of the drug violence plaguing rural Tennessee. Caleb counted muzzle flashes in his memory. 4 shooters, plus Morrison. 5 men with automatic weapons against 3 people with handguns and a baseball bat. Santos knows we're here, Morgan lied. FBI's already on the way. Nice try, but Hutchins was sloppy. We've been tracking his phone for weeks, knew about this meeting before you did. No one's coming to save you this time. Caleb felt Morgan trembling beside him, not fear, rage. The same rage that had driven her to face corruption alone, that had kept her fighting when everyone else looked away. I've got 6 rounds left, Rodriguez whispered. You? 8, Morgan replied. 14 bullets against 5 men. Not good odds, but Caleb had faced worse odds before, in places where the enemy knew the terrain and had them outnumbered 10-1. There's something they don't know, he whispered. I called someone too. Morgan looked at him in surprise, then hope, then understanding as sirens became audible in the distance. Not police sirens, fire sirens. You called the department? Texted, actually. Right before Hutchins showed up, told them if they didn't hear from me in an hour, come ready for trouble. The sirens grew louder. Morrison's men were shouting, arguing. They'd expected an execution, not a fight, certainly not the entire Millbrook Fire Department descending on them. "Move in," Morrison commanded. "Kill them before—" The first fire truck roared into view, spotlight blazing, illuminating the shooters like actors on a stage. Behind it, 2 more trucks, an ambulance, and, unexpectedly, beautifully, 3 state police cruisers. "Drop your weapons!" The voice over the loudspeaker belonged to Chief Patterson. Apparently retirement hadn't stuck. "This is your only warning." 2 of Morrison's men ran immediately, crashing through the underbrush toward the river. Another dropped his gun, hands up. The 4th hesitated, then followed suit. Morrison himself stood exposed in the spotlight, gun still in his hand, looking older and smaller than the powerful deputy chief who'd terrorized a city. "It's over, Morrison," Morgan called out, stepping from behind cover despite Caleb's attempt to hold her back. Morrison turned toward her, raised his gun, and Caleb moved without thinking. He stepped in front of Morgan just as Morrison fired, felt the impact like a sledgehammer to his chest, fell backward into Morgan's arms as more gunshots filled the air, state police returning fire, Morrison spinning and dropping, everything happening in slow motion and fast forward simultaneously. "Caleb!" "No, no, no!" Morgan's hands pressed against his chest, came away red. "Medic! I need a medic now!" But Caleb was looking past her at the stars, thinking how clear they were tonight, how Sarah had loved clear nights like this. His chest didn't hurt, which seemed wrong. Shouldn't it hurt? "Stay with me," Morgan was saying, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare leave Ethan. Caleb, please!" Paramedics swarmed them, pushed Morgan aside, worked with practiced efficiency. Caleb heard medical terms that meant nothing, felt pressure and movement and a mask over his face. Morgan's hand found his, squeezed tight. "Tell Ethan," he started. "Tell him yourself," she said fiercely. "You're going to be fine. You have to be fine." The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and swaying motion. Morgan never let go of his hand, kept talking, about their plans for the weekend, about the deck he was going to build, about the vacation they'd take when this was over. Her voice anchored him when everything else wanted to float away. At the hospital, the same one where they'd met properly 6 months ago, nurses and doctors descended like an army. Someone tried to make Morgan leave, but she flashed her chief's badge and used language that would have made a sailor blush, and they let her stay. Surgery. 4 hours while Morgan paced the waiting room, Rodriguez beside her, half the fire department keeping vigil. Mrs. Chen brought Ethan despite Morgan's protest that he shouldn't see this, shouldn't have to wait and wonder if he was about to lose his only remaining parent. But Ethan walked straight to Morgan, took her hand, and said with absolute certainty, "Dad's going to be okay. He's too stubborn to die." When Dr. Krishnan finally emerged, exhausted but smiling, the entire waiting room held its breath. The bullet missed his heart by 2 centimeters, nicked his lung, but we repaired the damage. He lost a lot of blood, but he's stable. He's going to make it. Morgan collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. Ethan crawled into her lap, holding her like Caleb had held him after nightmares. The firefighters cheered, Rodriguez called Santos to update her, and somewhere in federal custody, Judge Morse was being informed that his protection of Morrison had led to attempted murder of law enforcement and a civilian, charges that would put him away for life. Caleb woke to sunlight and the sound of steady breathing. Morgan was asleep in the chair beside his bed, hand still holding his. Ethan was curled against her other side, using her jacket as a blanket. "Hey," he whispered, throat dry as sandpaper. Morgan's eyes flew open. "You're awake. How do you feel? Do you need water? The nurse?" "I should get the nurse." "Morgan." He squeezed her hand weakly. "I'm okay. You got shot protecting me. That's not okay. That's the opposite of okay. Would do it again." "Well, don't." We agreed. No more heroics. "You were in danger. All bets were off, remember?" She kissed him then, careful of his bandages, but thorough enough that his heart monitor started beeping faster, which woke Ethan, who immediately demanded to know if they were finally going to get married now. "Let your dad recover first," Morgan said, but she was smiling. "Actually," Caleb said, fighting through pain medication fog, "I've been meaning to ask you something." Caleb Turner, If you propose to me while high on morphine in a hospital bed, I will say no out of principle. Not proposing. Yet. But I want you to move in. You and me and Ethan, proper family. No more pretending we're just friends who happen to spend every night together. Morgan looked at Ethan, who was bouncing with excitement. What do you think, kiddo? Want me around all the time? Yes. We can have pancakes every Saturday, and you can teach me to slide down the fire pole, and Dad will stop looking sad when he thinks no one's watching. I don't look sad, Caleb started, but Morgan kissed him again. Yes, she said. Yes to moving in, yes to pancakes, yes to being a proper family. The recovery took 2 months. 2 months of Morgan fussing over him, of Ethan reading to him from his homework, of the fire department stopping by in shifts to keep him company. Patterson visited twice, bringing chess and conversation about the old days before corruption poisoned everything. Santos came with good news. The flash drive Hutchins died protecting had broken the case wide open. 17 arrests, including Judge Morse and Senator Williams. A federal oversight committee taking over Millbrook's city government until special elections could be held. Morrison, who survived his wounds, facing life in federal prison with no possibility of bail or appeal. Hutchins is getting a posthumous commendation, Santos said. His daughter requested you three present it to her at the ceremony. We'll be there, Morgan promised. The ceremony was held at the state capitol, full of politicians trying to distance themselves from the scandal, and reporters who still called Caleb a hero, despite his insistence he was just a construction worker who'd been in the right place at the right time. Hutchins' daughter, Ashley, wore her Memphis FD dress uniform, standing tall despite tears streaming down her face as Morgan presented the commendation. My father wasn't perfect, she said in her speech. He made mistakes, stayed silent when he should have spoken. But in the end, he chose courage. He chose truth. He died protecting the people who were brave enough to do what he couldn't. That's the father I choose to remember. After the ceremony, Ashley pulled Caleb aside. He left something for you. Said if anything happened, I should give this to the man who saved Captain Hale. It was a photograph, Morrison and 5 other men at what looked like a hunting lodge, raising glasses in a toast. On the back, names and a date from 3 years ago, right before Sarah got sick, right before everything in Caleb's life fell apart. That's my father's handwriting, Ashley said. He wanted you to know there might be others. People who weren't in the official corruption ring, but who knew and did nothing. He thought you deserved the complete truth. Caleb studied the photo. 3 of the men were already arrested, 2 others he didn't recognize. But the 6th, everything okay? Morgan appeared at his elbow, immediately sensing his tension. He showed her the photo. She whistled low. Is that Thomas Brennan, owner of the warehouse that burned, the one who was supposedly renovating it into low-income housing? The renovation your company bid on and lost. Yeah, lost to a company that doesn't exist anymore. That was probably a front for Morrison's operation. Morgan took the photo, studied it carefully. We should give this to Santos. We will. But first, I want to know why Brennan's warehouse was full of stolen fire equipment, and why he's not in any of the official corruption reports. They investigated quietly, Morgan using her chief's access to dig through department records while Caleb tracked down construction permits and contracts. What they found was a second layer of corruption, older and deeper than Morrison's scheme. Brennan had been using his abandoned properties to store all kinds of stolen goods. Not just fire equipment, but medical supplies supposedly sent to rural clinics, construction materials meant for public works projects, even voting machines that had mysteriously disappeared after the last election. He's a fence, Morgan said, spreading their findings across Caleb's kitchen table. Their kitchen table now, since she'd officially moved in. Morrison was stealing and selling to him, but so were dozens of others. Police, city workers, even some state employees. This is huge, bigger than anything Morrison was involved in. And Brennan's still out there, probably destroying evidence right now. Ethan wandered in, rubbing sleepy eyes. Why are you guys up so late? Work stuff, buddy. Go back to bed. But Ethan was already looking at the papers, his 8-year-old mind making connections adults might miss. Hey, that's the man who came to school. Both adults froze. What man, Ethan? Mr. Brennan. He came for career day last month, talked about real estate and building communities. He gave me this. Ethan pulled a business card from his school folder, Brennan's smiling face above contact information, and a motto. Building better futures. Did he talk to you specifically? Morgan asked, keeping her voice carefully calm. Yeah, he knew Dad was in construction, said maybe he could help with work sometime. I told him Dad had plenty of work now because he's a hero, and Mr. Brennan got this weird look and said heroes should be careful because sometimes they make enemies. Caleb and Morgan exchanged looks over Ethan's head, a threat to an 8-year-old, at his school. Ethan, this is important, Caleb said. Did Mr. Brennan say anything else? Just that he'd be seeing us around. Why? Is he a bad guy? Maybe. But don't worry, we'll handle it. After Ethan went back to bed, Morgan was already on her phone with Santos. Within an hour, their house was under federal surveillance, and Brennan was being quietly investigated. But Brennan was smarter than Morrison, more careful. He'd been at this for decades, had connections Morrison could only dream of. When federal agents raided his properties, they were empty, cleaned out, sanitized, not even dust to suggest what had been there. Brennan himself disappeared like smoke, leaving behind only legitimate businesses run by lawyers who claimed to know nothing about any criminal activity. The investigation stalled, officials claimed there wasn't enough evidence, and life in Millbrook gradually returned to something like normal. Except Caleb couldn't let it go. The man had threatened his son, had been part of the cancer eating at his town for years. Sarah might still be alive if the money stolen from public health initiatives had gone where it was supposed to. How many people had suffered because of Brennan's greed? He started his own investigation, quiet and careful, used his construction connections to track building permits, followed paper trails through county records that hadn't been digitized yet, too old and obscure for Brennan to think about destroying. 3 months after getting shot, Caleb found what he was looking for in the county courthouse basement. Deed transfers from 15 years ago, properties Brennan had bought through shell companies, including one that made his blood run cold. The old Riverside Clinic, where Sarah had gone for her first symptoms, where they'd missed the cancer because they didn't have proper diagnostic equipment, the equipment that had been purchased but never delivered. Stolen and sold by Brennan while people like Sarah died for lack of early detection. Caleb sat in that dusty basement, holding proof that might have saved his wife, and made a decision that would have terrified the old him, the one who kept his head down and just survived. He called a reporter from the Washington Post who'd been sniffing around the Millbrook scandal, told her everything, gave her copies of every document, every connection he'd found. Then he called Santos and did the same thing. You know Brennan's dangerous, Santos warned. If he finds out you're the source, then he finds out. I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of people like him thinking they're untouchable. The story broke nationally. The Millbrook Files, they called it, with Caleb named as the primary source who'd uncovered a corruption network spanning 3 states and 2 decades. Brennan was arrested in Florida, trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. The threats came almost immediately, phone calls, letters, mysterious cars driving slowly past the house. But also support, other victims coming forward, other towns realizing their own corruption problems, a movement growing from one man's refusal to let injustice stand. You know we'll have to leave Millbrook, Morgan said one evening, watching yet another news van pull up outside. It's not safe anymore. I know. Rodriguez can handle the department. You've trained him well. Where would we go? Ethan looked up from his homework. Somewhere with good schools and a fire department that needs a chief and construction work for Dad and maybe a dog. That's a pretty specific list, buddy, Caleb said. I've been thinking about it. Since the bad men keep calling and Mom looks worried all the time. Morgan pulled Ethan into a hug. When did you start calling me Mom? Is that okay? You live here and you take care of us and you love Dad even when he does dangerous stuff. That seems like Mom stuff to me. Caleb watched Morgan tear up, watched his son casually reorganize their entire world with the simple logic of a child, and felt Sarah's presence like a warm breeze, approval, maybe, or just love transcending death. Colorado, Morgan said suddenly. I got an offer last week. Denver suburb needs a fire chief. They specifically wanted someone with integrity and courage, mentioned your name too, said they had plenty of construction work for a hero who stands up to corruption. You didn't mention this. I was waiting for the right time. But maybe the right time is now, when we need a fresh start, when we can be a family without looking over our shoulders. Caleb thought about it. Leaving Millbrook, leaving Sarah's grave, leaving the place where 4 generations of Turners had lived and worked. Then he thought about Ethan needing to check locks twice before bed, about Morgan keeping her service weapon within reach at all times, about the cancer of corruption that would take years to fully excise. Okay, he said, Colorado, new start. Really? Ethan bounced with excitement. Can we get a dog? We can get a dog. Can I learn to ski? Sure. Can Morgan and you get married? Caleb and Morgan looked at each other, and he saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes, that they were already a family in every way that mattered, that making it official was just paperwork, but that symbols mattered too, especially to 8-year-old boys who'd lost too much already. You know what? Caleb said, getting down on one knee despite the protest from his still healing chest. Morgan Hale, will you marry me? Will you officially become Ethan's mom and my wife and whatever else this crazy life throws at us? You're proposing now? In the kitchen? While under federal protection? Would you prefer I wait until the next time someone's shooting at us? Dad's got a point, Ethan said solemnly. People are always shooting at us now. Morgan laughed, pulled Caleb to his feet, kissed him thoroughly. Yes. Of course, yes. But I want a wedding without any corruption investigations, attempted murders, or burning buildings. That seems like a pretty high bar for us, Caleb said. But he was smiling, holding his family, his whole complete unexpected family, close. They left Millbrook 2 weeks later, a small convoy of trucks carrying their belongings and their hopes toward mountains they'd only seen in pictures. Mrs. Chen cried, Rodriguez promised to visit. Patterson shook Caleb's hand and said Sarah would be proud. At Sarah's grave, Caleb left flowers and a photo, him, Morgan, and Ethan at the courthouse after Brennan's conviction, looking tired but triumphant. I found them, he told the stone. The family you wanted me to have after you were gone. They're not replacing you, nothing could, but they're filling the spaces that were empty. Ethan's happy, really happy, and I think I am too. Wind rustled the cemetery trees, and for just a moment, he could swear he smelled Sarah's perfume, the one she only wore on special occasions. The drive to Colorado took 3 days, Ethan chattering excitedly about mountains and snow, while Morgan and Caleb took turns driving and planning their new life. They'd found a house online, 3 bedrooms, big yard, walking distance to Ethan's school, and Morgan's new fire station. And there's a construction company hiring veterans, Morgan said, reading from her phone, owned by a former Marine who specifically wants to hire people with integrity. You've really researched everything. I protect my family, she said simply, and Caleb had to pull over because his vision was blurring with tears he hadn't expected. What's wrong, Dad? Ethan asked from the back seat. Nothing's wrong, buddy. Everything's actually right for the first time in a long time. They arrived in Pine Ridge, Colorado on a Thursday afternoon, the mountains rising impossibly high against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Their new house was everything the pictures promised, solid, welcoming, with a porch swing that Ethan immediately claimed. The neighbors came out to greet them, apparently having heard their story. The fire department had hung a banner, Welcome Chief Hale and family. The construction company owner, Marcus Webb, was there with a job offer and a 6-pack of local beer. Town needs people like you, he said simply, people who do the right thing even when it costs them everything. That night, in their new home, boxes still packed around them, they sat on the floor eating pizza and planning their future. Ethan wanted to join the junior firefighter program. Morgan had ideas for community outreach, ways to build trust between the department and the people they served. Caleb had already spotted 3 properties that could be renovated into affordable housing, done right this time. No corruption investigations, Morgan said, raising her beer in a toast. No burning buildings. No one shooting at us. Boring, Ethan said with theatrical disappointment. Boring sounds perfect, Caleb countered, though part of him wondered if they could ever really have boring, if people like them. People who ran toward fires instead of away could ever truly settle into quiet lives. The answer came 6 months later when Morgan responded to what should have been a routine car accident and discovered a human trafficking ring operating through a supposed shipping company. When Caleb's construction crew found evidence of drug manufacturing in a building they were renovating. When Ethan noticed his teacher had bruises she tried to hide and quietly told Morgan, who quietly started an investigation that would save not just the teacher, but 6 other abuse victims. They couldn't help it. Seeing injustice and responding was who they were now, who they'd become through fire and bullets and the decision to stand up instead of staying down. But it was different in Pine Ridge. They weren't alone. The community stood with them, supported them, protected them in return. When the trafficking ring tried to threaten Morgan, the entire fire department showed up at their house. When the drug dealers tried to intimidate Caleb, Marcus Webb's construction crew, all veterans, all formidable, made it clear that wasn't happening. The wedding was supposed to be simple, just family and close friends, a small ceremony in the Pine Ridge Community Center with reception in the firehouse. Morgan wore her mother's dress, altered to fit her taller frame. Caleb wore his only suit, the one he'd bought for Sarah's funeral and hadn't worn since. Ethan served as both ring bearer and best man, taking his duties so seriously that he practiced his walk down the aisle 17 times the night before. "You sure you want to do this?" Marcus Webb asked, helping Caleb with his tie in the small room they designated for the groom's preparation. "Marriage changes things." "Already changed," Caleb said. "We've been living as a family for almost a year. This is just making it official." For Ethan. For all of us. Morgan deserves to know she's not just someone passing through our lives. She's permanent. She's home. Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd lost his own wife in Afghanistan, friendly fire that wasn't so friendly, spent years wondering if he'd ever feel whole again. Sarah would approve? Sarah would have loved her. They're nothing alike on the surface, but underneath, where it counts, same steel, same heart. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock. At 1:30, Caleb's phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but something about the number looked familiar. Tennessee area code. Caleb Turner. The voice was young, nervous. "This is Ashley Hutchins." "Detective Hutchins' daughter?" "Ashley? Is everything okay?" "I'm sorry to call you today. I heard about the wedding from Captain Rodriguez, but I found something in my dad's things, something you need to know about. It's about your wife." The words hit like ice water. "Sarah?" "What about Sarah?" "There's a recording from a meeting 3 years ago, right before she got sick. Morrison and Brennan and some others talking about the clinic, about making sure certain people didn't get proper treatment. Your wife's name comes up, Mr. Turner. They knew she was sick before you did." Caleb's legs gave out. He sat hard on a folding chair, Marcus immediately at his side. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they might have deliberately delayed her diagnosis, made sure the clinic didn't have the equipment to catch it early. My dad noted that Sarah Turner was becoming problematic. She was asking questions about city health funding at town meetings, pushing for investigations. They wanted her distracted or—" Ashley's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know if I should tell you, especially today, but I thought you deserved the truth." The phone slipped from Caleb's numb fingers. Marcus caught it, spoke quietly to Ashley, got the promise of the recording being sent immediately. Then he knelt beside Caleb, gripped his shoulders. "Talk to me, Turner." "They killed her." The words came out raw, bleeding. "Sarah didn't just die from cancer. They killed her by making sure it wasn't caught in time." "You don't know that for sure." "She went to that clinic 4 times with symptoms. 4 times they told her it was stress, lack of sleep, new mother stuff. By the time we got a real diagnosis, it was too late. But if they'd had the equipment they were supposed to have, the equipment Brennan stole..." Caleb stood abruptly, rage flooding through him like fire. He wanted to hit something, break something, burn down the entire world that had taken Sarah from him and Ethan. But then he heard it. Morgan's laugh from the other room, bright and alive, followed by Ethan's giggle. His family. His living, breathing, waiting family. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "I'm going to marry Morgan. I'm going to be there for my son. I'm going to live the life Sarah wanted me to have." He straightened his tie with shaking hands. "And then I'm going to make sure everyone involved in her death pays for it." "That's my boy." "Want me to tell Morgan?" "No, not today. Today's about moving forward, not looking back. I'll tell her tomorrow." The ceremony went off perfectly. Morgan was radiant. Ethan only dropped the rings once, and when Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the entire fire department erupted in cheers that could probably be heard in Denver. Caleb kissed his bride and tasted future on her lips, tasted hope and home, and the promise that maybe, finally, the worst was behind them. The reception was in full swing. Firefighters teaching Ethan complicated dance moves, Marcus regaling everyone with embarrassing stories about Caleb's first days on the construction crew, Morgan laughing so hard she had tears streaming down her face, when Santos walked in. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be in D.C. testifying in the final Brennan trial. But there she was, still in her court clothes, face grim. "I need to speak with you," she told Caleb and Morgan quietly. "Both of you. Now." They stepped outside into the Colorado evening, the mountains painted gold by setting sun. Santos looked exhausted, older than her years. Brennan made a deal. Full immunity in exchange for testimony about a larger network. He's going free. Morgan's hand found Caleb's, squeezed hard enough to hurt. Free? After everything he did? The DOJ thinks his information is worth more than justice for Millbrook. He's naming names all the way up to federal level. Senators, judges, even someone in the Attorney General's office. It's bigger than we ever imagined. And they're just letting him walk. Caleb's voice was deadly quiet, the tone Marcus would have recognized from combat. Witness protection, new identity, new life, probably somewhere tropical with all the money he hid offshore. Santos looked sick saying it. "I fought it, argued until I was blue, but the decision came from so far up I couldn't even see who made it." "When?" "He was released an hour ago. That's why I flew here immediately. There's more. He made threats during his debriefing, said some things about unfinished business, about people who cost him everything. Your names came up, multiple times." Morgan pulled out her phone, already texting her department. Within minutes, they had confirmation. Extra patrols around their house, someone watching Ethan at all times, the full protective weight of Pine Ridge mobilizing. "We can't live like this again," Morgan said, looking over our shoulders, wondering when he'll come. "You won't have to," Santos said. "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but Brennan's new identity is Thomas Brennan. He refused to change it, said he'd earned that name and wasn't giving it up. Arrogant bastard thinks he's untouchable now." "Why are you telling us this?" Caleb asked, though he already knew. "Because justice and law aren't always the same thing. Because good people sometimes have to make hard choices. Because I've seen what you two do when the system fails." She pulled out a folder, handed it to them. His new address. His schedule for the next month. His security details. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just providing information to concerned citizens." She left without another word, disappearing into the darkness like she'd never been there at all. Caleb and Morgan stood in silence, the folder between them like a loaded gun. Inside, their wedding reception continued, laughter and music and joy. Out here, the ghosts of everything they'd lost and everything they might still lose pressed close. "We're not killers," Morgan said finally. "No, we're not. But we're not victims either." "No, we're not that either." They went back inside, danced and laughed, and pretended everything was fine. Ethan fell asleep in Caleb's arms around 10, and Morgan carried him to Marcus's truck for the ride home. Marcus insisting on driving them, on staying the night, on making sure they were safe. In their bedroom, still in their wedding clothes, Caleb told Morgan about Ashley's call, about Sarah's death being more than just tragedy, about it being murder by indifference and greed. Morgan held him while he cried, grieving Sarah all over again, grieving the life they should have had, the mother Ethan should have grown up with. "What do you want to do?" she asked when his tears finally stopped. "I don't know. Part of me wants to hunt Brennan down, make him pay for everything he's taken. Part of me knows that's not who I am, not who Sarah would want me to be, not the father Ethan needs. What if there's a third option?" Caleb looked at her, his new wife, his unexpected salvation. "What kind of option?" "The kind where we don't kill him, but we don't let him win either." The kind where justice might not come from a courthouse, but it still comes. They stayed up all night planning, using skills learned through survival and necessity. Morgan's strategic mind from years of emergency response, Caleb's tactical experience from Iraq. Together, they crafted something that wasn't revenge, but wasn't forgiveness either. 3 weeks later, Thomas Brennan was settling into his new life in Miami. Beachfront condo paid for by the government, new identity complete with backstory, handlers who checked in once a day to make sure he was still breathing and still willing to testify. He was on his balcony, drinking expensive whiskey and watching the sun set over the ocean when his phone rang. Unknown number, but his new phone was supposed to be secure. "Hello, Thomas?" The voice was electronically distorted but somehow familiar. "Enjoying your freedom?" "Who is this? How did you get this number?" "We're the ghosts of everyone you killed through greed and indifference. Sarah Turner, who died because you stole medical equipment. James Patterson, who had a heart attack because the ambulance didn't have the defibrillator you sold on the black market. Lucy Chen, Mrs. Chen's granddaughter who burned in a fire because the department's ladder truck was sitting in your warehouse instead of responding to calls. You can't prove any of that. I have immunity from prosecution, not from justice." The line went dead. Brennan called his handlers immediately, demanded increased security, demanded they find whoever had called. But there was no trace, no digital footprints, nothing but ghosts in the machine. The calls continued. Every day at sunset, just as Brennan was trying to relax. Different voices each time, sometimes Morgan reading the names of victims, sometimes Caleb describing what those people had meant to their families, sometimes recordings of children asking why their parents never came home. Brennan stopped going onto his balcony, stopped answering unknown numbers. But the calls found him anyway. On his secure line, his handlers' phones, even the landline in his favorite restaurant. Then the packages started arriving. Not threats, nothing that could be traced or prosecuted, just reminders. A child's drawing signed by Ethan Turner showing a family with a missing mother. A wedding photo of a firefighter who died using faulty equipment. Medical bills from families bankrupted by treatments that should have been covered by stolen public health funds. Brennan tried to run. Bought tickets to Costa Rica, planning to disappear completely. But at the airport, every screen showed the same message. Running won't change what you did. He didn't get on the plane. His handlers found him 3 days later, sitting in his condo, surrounded by the photos and letters, sobbing. He confessed to everything. Not just what he'd already admitted, but decades of crimes, names and dates and amounts, a flood of guilt pouring out like poison from a wound. "I want to make it right," he kept saying. "Tell me how to make it right." The answer came in another anonymous package. Bank account numbers for every family he'd harmed. Instructions for transferring his hidden millions to them. Contact information for prosecutors in districts not covered by his immunity deal. Brennan did it all. Gave away every penny he'd hidden, confessed to crimes that would see him imprisoned in 3 states that hadn't signed onto his federal deal, provided evidence that took down 17 more conspirators who thought they'd escaped justice. When he was arrested by Montana State Police, Montana being notably absent from his immunity agreement, Caleb and Morgan watched from their living room in Pine Ridge, Ethan between them working on homework. "Did you do that, Dad?" Ethan asked, looking at the news footage of Brennan in handcuffs. "Make him confess?" "Sometimes people confess because the weight of their crimes becomes too heavy to carry," Caleb said carefully. "But you helped make it heavy, right? You and Mom?" Morgan ruffled his hair. "What makes you think that?" "Because you both disappeared a lot 3 weeks ago. And you had that look, the one you get when you're fighting bad guys. And now the bad guy's going to jail." He shrugged. "I'm not stupid." "No," Caleb agreed. "You're definitely not stupid." "Is it over now? All the bad stuff from before?" Caleb and Morgan exchanged glances over his head. The truth was, it would never really be over. There would always be another Morrison, another Brennan, another corruption to fight or injustice to face. They were the kind of people who ran toward fires, after all. But for now, in this moment, with Brennan facing justice and their family safe and whole, they could pretend. "Yeah, buddy," Caleb said. "The bad stuff from before is over." That night, after Ethan was asleep, Caleb and Morgan sat on their porch swing, watching stars appear over the mountains. The house was quiet, the neighborhood peaceful, no sirens or gunshots or threats in the darkness. "You know, Santos could lose her job if anyone figures out she gave us that information," Morgan said. "She knew the risk, decided justice was worth it. Like we did. Like we always do." Morgan leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think Sarah would approve of what we did to Brennan?" Caleb thought about it, remembering Sarah's fierce protectiveness, her quiet strength, her belief that good should triumph even when the system failed. "I think she would understand that sometimes justice has to find its own way. Through ghosts and phone calls? Through whatever works." They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently, until Morgan spoke again. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like stars suddenly made tangible, bright and impossible, and absolutely real. Caleb turned to stare at her, saw her nervous smile, the hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "When? How? When? About 6 weeks ago. How?" "Well, when a man and a woman love each other very much, Morgan." She laughed, that bright sound that had pulled him from darkness more times than he could count. "I found out this morning. Was going to tell you at the reception, but then Santos showed up, and everything went sideways, and—" Caleb kissed her, deep and thorough, tasting hope and future and the promise of life continuing despite everything they'd endured. "Ethan's going to be thrilled," he said when they finally broke apart. "A little brother or sister to protect. He'll take it as seriously as he took ring bearer duties. Sarah would have loved this, would have loved you being the one to give Ethan siblings. You think about her a lot on happy days, don't you? Is that weird? Being happy with you but still missing her? No, it's love. Different kinds maybe, but all real, all important." Morgan took his hand, placed it on her stomach. "This baby will know about Sarah, about the mother who came before, who loved their daddy and big brother enough to fight death itself for 8 extra months. And they'll know about you. The mother who ran into burning buildings, who fought corruption, who became a ghost to bring down the man who killed Sarah. We're going to be terrible at normal, aren't we? This kid's going to grow up thinking everyone's parents hunt bad guys and save people from fires. Could be worse. Could grow up thinking it's normal to look away from injustice." A year later, when Emma Sarah Turner was born, red-faced and screaming and perfect, Caleb held his daughter for the first time and felt the circle close. Not an ending, but a completion, the family Sarah had wanted him to have finally whole. Ethan took his big brother duties more seriously than his homework, insisted on helping with every feeding and diaper change, read to Emma from his school books because she needs to be smart like mom and dad. Morgan went back to work after 6 weeks, bringing Emma to the firehouse where she became the unofficial mascot, dressed in a onesie that said "Future Firefighter," and sleeping through sirens that would wake the dead. Caleb's construction company, he'd started his own with Marcus's backing, specialized in rebuilding after disasters. When floods hit northern Colorado, Turner Construction was there. When fires ravaged the western slope, they rebuilt homes at cost. When a tornado tore through a trailer park, they worked for free. "You know you'll never get rich doing this," Marcus pointed out, reviewing the books that showed more charity than profit. "Sarah didn't marry me for my money, neither did Morgan. Besides, we've got enough. And when the kids need college, Ethan's already got 3 scholarship offers from his science fair projects. Emma will probably get a full ride for being stubborn alone. Life settled into rhythms. Not normal, never quite normal for people like them, but sustainable. Morgan ran the best fire department in the state. Response times down and save rates up and corruption non-existent under her watch. Caleb built and rebuilt, creating homes where families could thrive. Ethan grew tall and thoughtful, Sarah's intelligence mixed with Caleb's determination and Morgan's strategic mind. Emma grew loud and fearless, climbing before she could properly walk, saying "fire truck" as her first word to Morgan's delight and Caleb's mock dismay. 5 years passed, then 10. The calls from Tennessee faded, the threats ended, the past became something they could talk about without constantly looking over their shoulders. Then, On a random Tuesday, when Emma was 12 and Ethan was heading to college, the phone rang. Mr. Turner? This is Warden Davidson at Montana State Prison. Thomas Brennan is asking to see you. He's dying. Cancer. Maybe 3 weeks left. Says he needs to tell you something about your wife. Your first wife. Caleb found Morgan in the kitchen, helping Emma with pre-algebra while managing 3 different crisis calls for the department. She looked up, immediately reading his face. What's wrong? He told her about the call, watched her expression shift from concern to anger to something more complex. You're going, she said. It wasn't a question. I have to. If there's something about Sarah, we're all going. This is a family matter. Morgan, non-negotiable. Emma's old enough to know our history. Ethan's definitely coming. Sarah was his mother. And I'm not letting you face that man alone. So they drove to Montana, the whole family, Ethan home from MIT, where he was studying engineering and emergency management, a perfect blend of his 3 parents' strengths. Emma complained about missing soccer practice until Ethan explained who Brennan was, what he'd done, why this mattered. So he's the reason my middle name is Sarah? Emma asked. Part of the reason, Caleb said. The other part is that Sarah represents strength and love and fighting even when you know you can't win. Like you guys do. We try. The prison was maximum security, gray and forbidding against the Montana sky. They went through multiple checkpoints, searches, forms to fill out. Finally, they were led to the medical ward where Brennan lay dying, hooked to machines, looking like a ghost of the man who'd once terrorized a town. You came, he wheezed. Talk, Caleb said. No greeting, no sympathy, just business. Sarah. You're Sarah. She wasn't random. Morrison picked her specifically. We know. She was asking questions. No. Brennan coughed, specks of blood on his lips. Before that, she interviewed for a job at City Hall, assistant to the city manager, would have had access to all the financial records. She was perfect for it, smart, detail-oriented, impossible to corrupt. They knew she'd find everything within a month. So they made sure she never got the chance. The clinic doctor, Phelps, he's still practicing. Still has the original test results, the real ones showing the cancer markers. Morrison paid him to alter them, delay treatment until it was too late. Caleb felt Morgan's hand in his, grounding him. Felt Ethan's presence at his shoulder, solid and real. Felt Emma's confusion and growing anger. Why tell me now? Because I'm dying the same way she did. Cancer eating me from the inside. Because I dream about her every night, her and all the others. Because maybe if I tell the truth, the dreams will stop. They left without another word. In the parking lot, Ethan was crying, silent tears for the mother he barely remembered. Emma was raging, wanting to go back and yell at Brennan, make him hurt more. Morgan was already on the phone with Santos, setting wheels in motion. We're going to get Phelps, she said. Justice for Sarah, even after all this time. No, Caleb said, surprising them all. We're going home. Dad, Ethan started. Sarah's dead. Has been for 15 years. Destroying Phelps won't bring her back. Won't change what happened. We've spent so much time looking backward, fighting old battles. Maybe it's time to really move forward. But he killed her. And he'll face judgment for that, just not from us. Sarah wouldn't want us wasting our lives on revenge. She'd want us living, building, saving people, being the family she knew we could become. They drove home in contemplative silence, each processing in their own way. That night, Caleb found himself at Sarah's grave. She'd been moved to Pine Ridge Cemetery at Ethan's request when he turned 16, wanting his mother close. I know the truth now, he told the headstone. All of it. The conspiracy, the deliberate murder, everything. And I'm choosing to let it go. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because holding on to it is poison. You taught me that those last 8 months. How to live even when dying. How to love even when leaving. How to hope even when hopeless. Wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment, just a moment, he could swear he felt Sarah's hand in his, warm and approving. When he got home, Morgan was on the porch swing, Emma curled against her side, Ethan sitting on the steps with his laptop, designing something that looked like a memorial. What's that? Caleb asked. The Sarah Turner Center for Early Cancer Detection, Ethan said. I've been working on it with my professors. Low-cost screening technology that can be deployed to rural clinics. Emma's soccer team wants to do a fundraiser. Mom, Morgan, says the fire department will sponsor it. We can't change what happened, but maybe we can prevent it from happening to others. Caleb sat beside Morgan, pulled his family close. Sarah would love that. She would love all of this, Morgan said. This family, this life, this choice to build instead of destroy. That night Brennan died alone in prison. His last words a list of names, all the people he'd wronged, all the ghosts that haunted him. The nurse said he seemed peaceful at the end, like confession had finally brought the absolution he'd sought. Dr. Phelps lost his license a month later when an anonymous tip led to an investigation of 15 years of altered test results. Not just Sarah, dozens of patients whose treatments had been delayed or denied based on his falsified reports. But by then, the Turner family had moved on to other fights, other fires to run toward. The Sarah Turner Center broke ground on the anniversary of her death. Caleb and Morgan and Ethan and Emma all wielding shovels while the community watched. In his speech, Caleb said, Sarah Turner was murdered by greed and indifference. But she was also loved beyond measure, and that love has grown into something larger than her killers could have imagined. This center is proof that good can come from evil, that hope can rise from ashes, that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and helping others do the same. The center opened a year later, providing free screenings that caught 17 cases of early-stage cancer in its first month alone. Each patient who walked through its doors passed under a plaque that read, "In memory of Sarah Turner and all those who deserved better. In honor of those who fight for justice. In hope of a future where healthcare is a right, not a privilege." Ethan graduated MYT, came home to Pine Ridge, started working with Morgan to integrate his emergency management systems into the fire department. Emma made varsity soccer as a freshman, her ferocity on the field matched only by her compassion off it. She volunteered at the center every weekend, holding hands with scared patients, reminding them that survival was possible. Caleb's company expanded, taking on bigger projects, always maintaining the principle of rebuilding better than before. Morgan became the longest-serving fire chief in Pine Ridge history, her department a model for others nationwide. And through it all, they remembered the night it began, a warehouse fire in Tennessee, a stranger running toward danger, a connection forged in flame and smoke that would reshape multiple lives. They told the story to Emma's friends, to Ethan's colleagues, to anyone who needed reminding that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. Heroes aren't special, Caleb would say. They're just people who see someone in trouble and decide to help. People who run toward the fire instead of away. Even when they're scared? Some child would inevitably ask. Especially then, Morgan would answer. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Caleb and Morgan renewed their vows in the firehouse, surrounded by the community they'd protected and served. Ethan stood as Caleb's best man, Emma as Morgan's maid of honor. Santos flew in from D.C., where she now headed the public corruption unit. Rodriguez came from Millbrook, where he'd just been elected sheriff on a reform platform. Even Mrs. Chen made the journey, older and frailer but still insisting on making her famous dumplings for the reception. As they exchanged rings again, the same ones, just more worn, more precious for the wearing, Caleb thought about time and fire and the strange paths that led to love. He thought about Sarah, always, but without pain now. Only gratitude for the time they'd had, and the push she'd given him toward this second chance. You still gonna run into burning buildings for me? Morgan asked as they danced, the question a callback to that long-ago promise. Every time, he said, always, forever. Good. Because there's something I need to tell you. Morgan, we're not having another kid. Emma nearly killed us both with her teenage years. Not a kid. A job. The state wants me to head up a new task force on public corruption and emergency service protection, based in Denver but with jurisdiction everywhere. They want you too, someone who understands both construction fraud and how criminals think. We're too old to be chasing bad guys again. We're experienced. There's a difference. Caleb spun her, dipped her, kissed her as their friends and family cheered. Sarah always said I couldn't resist a cause. So that's a yes? That's a we'll see. But probably yes. Definitely yes if you keep kissing me like that. The task force launched 6 months later, the Turner-Hale Initiative for Public Integrity. Their first case brought down a senator who'd been skimming disaster relief funds. Their second exposed a network of contractors using substandard materials in school construction. By their 10th case, they'd recovered $300 million in stolen funds and secured 47 convictions. Ethan joined them after a year, bringing his technical expertise. Emma, fresh out of college with a degree in criminal justice and fire science, because why choose, became their youngest investigator. The Turner-Hale Initiative had been operating for 3 years when the call came that would change everything again. Emma was reviewing financial records from a construction company suspected of defrauding FEMA when her computer screen flickered, then displayed a single message. The fire in Tennessee was never about Morrison. She called out to her father, who was in the adjacent office with Morgan, planning their testimony for an upcoming trial. Ethan looked up from his own workstation, where he'd been tracking suspicious money transfers through 17 shell companies. "Dad, you need to see this." They gathered around Emma's screen as more text appeared, typing itself like a ghost at the keyboard. Morrison was a distraction. The warehouse was a trap, but not for Captain Hale. For you, Caleb Turner. "This is impossible," Ethan said, fingers flying across his keyboard, trying to trace the source. "I've got military-grade encryption on our systems." Sarah knew. That's why they killed her first. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. Morgan's hand found his, steadying him as more text appeared. "Check the warehouse ownership records. Not Brennan. Before Brennan. 20 years back." Then the screen went black, the message vanishing like it had never existed. Ethan immediately began running recovery protocols, but there was nothing. No trace of intrusion, no evidence of the message except their shared memory of it. "Could be someone trying to destabilize us," Morgan said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We've made a lot of enemies." "Or it could be someone trying to help," Emma countered. "Someone who knows something we don't." Caleb was already pulling up property records on his tablet, searching for the warehouse that had burned in Millbrook 20 years ago. The official record showed Brennan's ownership, but Emma was right. There were gaps, inconsistencies that suggested earlier documents had been purged. "I need to go back to Tennessee," Caleb said. "We need to go back," Morgan corrected. "This involves all of us now. It could be a trap. Someone trying to lure us back, then we spring it, better than waiting for them to come to us." She turned to their children. Though Ethan was 33 and Emma 22, she still thought of them as children sometimes. "You two stay here. Keep the initiative running." "Not a chance," Emma said flatly. "You trained us for this. We're not sitting on the sidelines." "She's right," Ethan added. "Besides, if someone can hack our systems that easily, nowhere is safe. At least together we can watch each other's backs." The drive to Millbrook took 2 days, the family rotating drivers, each lost in their own thoughts about what they might find. The town had changed in the 15 years since they'd left. New buildings where old ones had stood, a shopping center where the textile mill used to be, progress and decay in equal measure. Rodriguez met them at the town limits, older now, gray threading through his hair, sheriff's badge catching the light. "Got your call," he said, embracing each of them in turn. "Pulled everything I could find about the warehouse. You're not going to like what I discovered." He led them to his office, walls covered with commendations and photos from his years in service. A locked file cabinet in the corner held records that officially didn't exist. Rodriguez had learned from Patterson's example, keeping his own insurance against corruption. "The warehouse wasn't originally Brennan's," he said, spreading yellowed documents across his desk. "It belonged to a company called Prometheus Holdings, incorporated in Delaware, owned by a trust in the Caymans, layers of shell companies that would make your head spin." "When did Brennan acquire it?" Morgan asked, studying the papers. "That's the thing. He didn't acquire it. It was transferred to him. No money changed hands. Like someone gave him a building worth $2 million out of the goodness of their heart." "When?" Caleb's voice was tight. 3 months before Sarah got sick." The room fell silent, pieces of a larger puzzle starting to form a picture none of them wanted to see. Emma broke the silence. So someone gave Brennan the warehouse, knowing he'd use it for his illegal storage. Knowing eventually someone would investigate, knowing there'd be a fire. That's a lot of knowing, Ethan said, but he was already working on his laptop, digging into Prometheus Holdings. This is weird. Prometheus was dissolved the day after the fire, like someone was cleaning up loose ends. Who signed the dissolution papers? Morgan asked. A lawyer named Vincent Cross. Based in Nashville, specializes in corporate law, and Ethan's face went pale. And he's Sarah's cousin. Mom's cousin. Sarah's maiden name was Cross. Caleb sat down heavily, the weight of revelation pressing down on him. Vincent was at our wedding, at Sarah's funeral. He helped with the estate paperwork after she died. Dad, Emma said gently, could Sarah have been investigating something? Before she got sick? Something that made her a target? Caleb thought back, mining memories he'd tried to bury. Sarah, in those months before her diagnosis, distracted and worried, spending late nights at the computer, making calls she'd end when he entered the room. She was concerned about something, said it was work stuff, nothing for me to worry about. I was so focused on Ethan being a baby, on making ends meet, I didn't push. We need to talk to Vincent Cross, Morgan said. Can't, Rodriguez interjected. Died 5 years ago, car accident on I-40. Suspicious circumstances, brake lines looked tampered with, but it was ruled accidental. The ghost in the machine had been right. They'd all been looking at Morrison, at Brennan, at the surface corruption, while something deeper lurked beneath. There's more, Rodriguez said reluctantly. After you called, I did some digging into Sarah's last month. She'd been in contact with a federal prosecutor named Diana Walsh. 3 meetings in the 2 months before her diagnosis. Walsh is still alive, retired, living in Knoxville. Then that's where we go next, Caleb said, standing. Whatever Sarah was investigating, Walsh might know. They drove to Knoxville that evening, the Tennessee mountains rising around them like walls of judgment. Diana Walsh lived in a modest ranch house in a quiet suburb, the kind of place people went to forget they'd once fought larger battles. She answered the door with a pistol barely concealed behind her back, relaxing only when she recognized Caleb from old newspaper photos. I wondered when you'd come, she said, leading them into a living room that was part library, part fortress. Books everywhere, but also security cameras, reinforced windows, the subtle preparations of someone who'd made dangerous enemies. You know why we're here? Morgan asked. Sarah Turner. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to ask the right questions about her death. Walsh poured herself whiskey, didn't offer them any. She came to me with evidence of something that made Morrison's corruption look like jaywalking. A network of powerful people, judges, politicians, business leaders, who were systematically looting disaster relief funds, federal grants, any pot of money meant to help vulnerable populations. Why didn't you prosecute? Ethan asked. Because Sarah died before she could testify. Because Vincent Cross died before he could turn over documents. Because every witness either disappeared or recanted. Because when I pushed too hard, my own daughter nearly died in a suspicious accident, and I got the message loud and clear, back off or lose everything. But you kept records, Emma said. It wasn't a question. Walsh smiled grimly. Everything, names, dates, amounts, 20 years of evidence that I've been too scared to use. But you four, the family that took down Morrison and Brennan, that exposed corruption across 3 states, maybe you're strong enough to finish what Sarah started. She disappeared into another room, returned with a banker's box that looked like it had been handled with reverence and fear in equal measure. This is everything Sarah gathered, plus what I've added over the years. The network is still active, still stealing, still destroying lives. But they're also older now, maybe complacent, maybe vulnerable. Caleb opened the box with trembling hands. Sarah's handwriting covered pages of notes, her methodical mind having tracked money and connections with the same intensity she'd once used to plan their future. One name appeared repeatedly, circled and underlined. Alexander Thorne. Who's Alexander Thorne? Morgan asked. The spider at the center of the web. Publicly, he's a philanthropist, disaster relief coordinator, friend to politicians on both sides. Privately, he's the architect of a system that's stolen billions meant for victims of floods, fires, hurricanes, earthquakes. Every major disaster in the last 30 years, Thorne's organization has been there, supposedly helping, but actually plundering. And Sarah figured this out? Sarah was brilliant. She saw patterns everyone else missed. She was building a case that would have brought down the entire network, so they killed her, made it look like cancer. It was cancer, Caleb interrupted. I was there. I watched her die. Yes, it was cancer, but induced cancer. Experimental drugs slipped into her food over months, triggering aggressive tumor growth. By the time she showed symptoms, it was too late. The perfect murder. No violence, no obvious crime, just a young mother tragically dying from a disease that kills millions. The room spun around Caleb. Morgan's arms were around him, holding him upright, but he could barely feel them. Sarah hadn't just been murdered, she'd been tortured, slowly, deliberately, while he'd slept beside her, oblivious. How do you know this? Emma demanded, her voice sharp with fury. Because the same thing happened to me, Walsh said, rolling up her sleeve to reveal surgical scars. Caught it early, thanks to Sarah's fate warning me. Aggressive treatment, barely survived. The message was clear. Stop investigating or die like she did. Why didn't you come forward? Ethan's question held no judgment, just curiosity. With what? Suspicions? Circumstantial evidence? Accusing one of the most powerful men in the country of murder? I'd have been dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, then probably had an accident soon after. But now we have more than suspicions, Morgan said, steel in her voice. We have the Turner Hale Initiative, federal authority, resources, protection. And we have something else, Caleb said, finding his voice again. We have nothing left to lose. They already took Sarah. They've already tried to kill us multiple times. What else can they threaten us with? Walsh studied them for a long moment, then made a decision that would unleash forces none of them fully understood. Thorne's holding a fundraiser tomorrow night. Nashville, the Grand Hyatt. $500 a plate to support disaster relief efforts in the Midwest. Every corrupt official in 3 states will be there, thinking they're untouchable. She pulled out an envelope. I've had these tickets for 3 years, waiting for someone brave enough to use them. 4 tickets to the fundraiser. 4 opportunities to get close to the man who'd orchestrated Sarah's death. This isn't about justice anymore, Caleb said quietly. This is about vengeance. No, Morgan corrected, taking the tickets. This is about prevention. How many people have died because disaster relief funds bought some politician a yacht instead of medical supplies? How many Sarah Turners have there been? This is about stopping it from happening again. They spent the night in a hotel outside Nashville planning. Ethan would infiltrate the fundraiser's computer systems, documenting financial transactions in real time. Emma would work the room, her youth and charm making her seem harmless while she recorded conversations. Morgan would coordinate with Santos and federal backup waiting outside, and Caleb would confront Thorne directly. It's too dangerous, Morgan argued. If he recognizes you, he won't. I was nobody 20 years ago, just Sarah's husband, the grieving widower. He's probably forgotten I exist. Men like that don't forget anything. Then maybe it's time he remembered. The Grand Hyatt ballroom was a symphony of wealth and corruption, crystal chandeliers casting light on people who operated best in shadows. Caleb walked through the crowd in his rented tuxedo, Sarah's wedding ring on a chain around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt but burning against his skin. He spotted Thorne immediately, silver-haired, distinguished, holding court near the stage where he'd soon appeal for donations to help flooding victims who'd never see a penny of the money raised. Emma was already working, laughing at a senator's joke while her concealed recorder captured his admission of kickbacks. Ethan had disappeared into the service areas, presumably finding a network access point. Morgan was at the bar watching everything with the intensity of someone planning emergency evacuations. Caleb approached Thorne during a lull in conversation, extending his hand. Mr. Thorne? Caleb Turner. I believe you knew my wife, Sarah. The transformation was instant. Thorne's practiced smile froze, his eyes going sharp and cold. Mr. Turner, I heard you'd moved to Colorado. What brings you back to Tennessee? Unfinished business, Sarah's business, actually. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you do. See, Sarah was brilliant, but she made one mistake. She thought the system would protect her if she found evidence of corruption. She didn't realize the system was the corruption. Thorne's security was already moving closer, subtle but present. Mr. Turner, you seem to be under some misapprehensions. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Like you discussed things privately with Sarah? With Vincent Cross? With Diana Walsh? I don't know what you're talking about. Then let me refresh your memory. Caleb pulled out his phone, showed Thorne a photo. Sarah, in her final days, smiling despite the pain, holding baby Ethan. This is who you murdered. This is the woman whose death you ordered because she threatened your empire of theft. You're being ridiculous. Your wife died of cancer, tragic but natural. Nothing natural about experimental carcinogens slipped into someone's food. Nothing natural about a perfectly healthy 30-year-old developing aggressive cancer weeks after she started investigating you. The security guards were close now, ready to intervene. But Caleb wasn't done. Here's what's going to happen, Thorne. The FBI is already downloading your organization's financial records. My son's very good with computers. They're recording every conversation in this room. My daughter's very good with people. And in about 5 minutes, federal agents are going to arrest everyone here for conspiracy, fraud, and murder. You have no proof of murder. Actually, we do. Morgan appeared at Caleb's elbow, badge visible now. Diana Walsh kept tissue samples from Sarah's autopsy. Private Lab just confirmed the presence of synthetic compounds known to cause aggressive tumor growth. Same compounds found in Vincent Cross's system and 3 other witnesses who died of sudden cancer after crossing you. Thorne's composure finally cracked. You don't understand what you're doing. The network I've built. It's not just about money. It's about power, control, maintaining order in chaotic times. Without us, the system collapses. Good, Caleb said simply. Let it collapse. Build something better from the ashes. The FBI agents entered then, weapons drawn but not aimed, professional and overwhelming. The room erupted in chaos, people running, shouting, demanding lawyers. Thorne stood perfectly still as agents cuffed him, his eyes never leaving Caleb's face. Your wife would be ashamed, he said quietly. She believed in justice, not vengeance. My wife believed in truth, Caleb replied. And the truth is, you're a murderer who's about to spend the rest of his life in prison. Sarah would find justice in that. As Thorne was led away, Caleb felt something lift from his shoulders, not the grief that would never fully leave, but the weight of unfinished business, of questions unanswered, of justice delayed. Emma and Ethan flanked him, their mission complete, their family's ghosts finally laid to rest. Morgan took his hand, squeezed it, understood without words that this moment was both ending and beginning. The arrests made international news. 43 people charged, including 2 governors, 5 senators, and dozens of business leaders. The Turner-Hale Initiative was credited with exposing the largest disaster relief fraud in history, recovering nearly $2 billion that was redirected to actual victims. But for Caleb, the victory was smaller and more personal. It was sitting at Sarah's grave with Ethan and Emma, telling her that her work was finished, her death avenged, her sacrifice not wasted. She would be so proud of you both, he told his children, of who you've become, what you've accomplished. She would be proud of you too, Dad, Ethan said. You never gave up. Even when it would have been easier, safer, you never gave up on getting her justice. And you found love again, Emma added. She would want that for you, want you to be happy with Mom, with Morgan. They sat in comfortable silence, 3 generations united by loss and love, and the determination to make the world better than they found it. That night, back in Pine Ridge, the family gathered for dinner like they had countless times before. But this time felt different, lighter, freer, like a long-held breath finally released. So what now? Emma asked, passing the salad. The conspiracy's exposed. Thorne's going to prison, the network's destroyed. Do we just retire? Morgan laughed. We're the Turners. We don't retire. We find the next fire and run toward it. Actually, Caleb said, I've been thinking. The Turner-Hale Initiative has grown beyond just us. Maybe it's time to expand officially, create regional offices, train new investigators, build something that outlasts us. The Sarah Turner Memorial Foundation, Ethan suggested, combining the investigation work with the cancer screening programs. Prevention and justice, working together. I like it, Morgan said. Sarah's legacy living on through helping others. They talked late into the night, planning this new future, this expansion of their mission. The phone rang occasionally, congratulations from Santos, from Rodriguez, from others who'd fought alongside them. Each call a reminder that they weren't alone, had never been alone, even in the darkest moments. Around midnight, Caleb stood on the porch, looking at stars that seemed especially bright. Morgan joined him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "Any regrets?" she asked. "No. Well, one. I wish Sarah could have seen this, seen them, seen what her sacrifice led to. Maybe she can. Maybe she has been, all along." A shooting star streaked across the sky, brief, brilliant, impossible to ignore. Caleb had never been particularly spiritual, but in that moment he could almost believe Sarah was sending a message. Well done. Now love. "I love you," he told Morgan, turning in her arms. "I love this life we've built, this family we've created, this mission we share. Even though it started with you running into a burning building? Especially because of that. Best spontaneous decision I ever made." They kissed under the stars, two souls who'd found each other through tragedy and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes. Inside, Emma was showing Ethan plans for the Foundation's first satellite office. They wanted it in Millbrook, Tennessee, returning to where it all began, reclaiming the town from its history of corruption. "Full circle," Ethan said, approving. "More like a spiral," Emma corrected. "We're going back, but higher up, with more perspective, more power to actually change things." Mom would like that metaphor. Both moms. They looked at their parents through the window, Caleb and Morgan still on the porch, still holding each other, still very much in love after everything they'd endured. "We're lucky," Emma said quietly, "because we survived. Because we survived together. Because we became a family, not in spite of the trauma, but through it. Boss, because we learned that running toward fire isn't just about heroism. It's about faith that something better waits on the other side." 6 months later, the Sarah Turner Memorial Foundation opened its doors in 5 cities. The Millbrook office was built on the site of the old warehouse, the place where Caleb had saved Morgan, where their story truly began. The opening ceremony drew hundreds, survivors of disasters, families helped by the screenings, investigators trained by the Turner-Hale methods. Caleb spoke first, his words simple but powerful. Sarah Turner believed one person could make a difference. She was right. But she also knew that real change requires community, requires all of us running toward the fire together. This foundation is her vision realized, not just fighting corruption or disease, but building a world where neither can take root. Morgan followed, her chief's uniform replaced by a suit, but her bearing still commanding. We've all lost someone to fires, literal or metaphorical. The question is what we do with that loss. Do we let it consume us, or do we use it to forge something stronger? Sarah Turner's death lit a fire that exposed corruption, saved lives, and brought together a family that continues her fight. May we all burn as brightly. Ethan announced the Foundation's latest innovation, an AI system that could detect patterns of corruption in public spending, named SARAH, System for Accountability, Recovery, and Honest Allocation. Emma revealed the Foundation's youth program, training the next generation of investigators and advocates, ensuring the mission would continue long after the original fire runners were gone. As the ceremony concluded, Caleb found himself standing where the warehouse wall had collapsed, where he'd first seen Morgan trapped and made the choice that changed everything. The spot was marked now with a plaque. Sometimes heroes are just ordinary people who choose to run toward danger instead of away. "Thinking about that night?" Morgan asked, joining him. "Thinking about all of it. How Sarah's death led to saving you, which led to exposing Morrison, which led to finding Thorne, which led to this. Like there was a plan all along, we just couldn't see it." Sarah's plan, maybe. One last investigation, conducted from beyond. "You think she knew? What would come from her research?" I think she knew we'd never let it go. You, because you loved her. Me, because I loved you. The kids, because they loved us all. She set forces in motion that couldn't be stopped. Forces, Caleb repeated, liking the word. That's what we are, isn't it? Forces for change, for justice, for hope. For fire, Morgan added with a smile. Always running toward the fire. The Foundation's first year saw 37 corruption cases exposed, 243 early cancer diagnoses, and 1,016 investigators trained. But more importantly, it saw the creation of a network of people who refused to look away from injustice, who ran toward danger, who believed that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. Caleb kept a photo on his desk, 2 photos actually, side by side. One of Sarah, young and vibrant, holding baby Ethan. One of his current family at the Foundation opening, Morgan and Emma and adult Ethan, all looking forward with purpose and hope. Between the photos sat a piece of melted metal from the warehouse fire, twisted but unbroken, ugly but somehow beautiful. A reminder that sometimes destruction was just transformation waiting to reveal itself. The phone rang. Another case, another fire to run toward. Caleb answered it with the words that had become the Foundation's unofficial motto, Sarah's last words mixed with Morgan's philosophy. Turner Foundation, we run toward the fire. How can we help? Because that's what heroes did. Not because they were special, but because they saw someone in need and chose to act. Because they understood that fire destroyed but also purified, that running toward danger was really running toward the chance to save someone, to change something, to matter. Sarah had run toward the fire of corruption and been consumed, but from her ashes rose a phoenix of justice that would burn for generations. And somewhere, in whatever came after this life, Caleb believed she was watching, smiling, proud of the family that had formed in flame and emerged stronger for the burning. The fire never really ended. It just spread, controlled now, purposeful, warming instead of destroying. And the Turners, all of them by blood or choice or both, would tend it forever, ensuring that Sarah's light would never be extinguished. In the end, that was the real victory. Not the arrests or the recovered money or the lives saved, though all of those mattered. The real victory was that love had triumphed over loss, that hope had risen from despair, that a construction worker who ran into a burning building had built something that would outlast any structure. The real victory was family, forged in fire, tempered by trial, and absolutely unbreakable. As Caleb hung up the phone, already planning the Foundation's response to the new case, Morgan caught his eye from across the office. She smiled, that same smile that had sustained him through bullets and investigations and raising 2 remarkable children. "New fire?" she asked. "Always," he replied. "Then let's run toward it. Together? Always together." And they did, as they always would, until the last fire was extinguished or the last runner fell. But even then, Ethan and Emma would continue, and their children after them, and the children they trained and inspired. Because that's what Sarah had taught them all, in her living and in her dying, that fires were meant to be faced, that justice was worth any price, and that love, real love, the kind that survived death and inspired life, was the most powerful force in the universe. The Turner Foundation's phones kept ringing, fires kept burning, and heroes, ordinary people choosing extraordinary courage, kept running toward them, just as Sarah Turner always knew they would.